Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of What If Naruto was a Sensory-Nin and became the head of Root. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 9. He dodged Roshi's punch but found little satisfaction in doing so. The ground under his feet was increasing in temperature and he could feel the lava roiling below him. Naruto tried to ignore the sweat as Roshi pressed his assault. The four-tailed Jinchuriki was in a cloak of the Yonbi's chakra. To engage in melee against him was out of the question. He'd have to resort to ninjutsu. Or, he would if he had any ninjutsu that would have been a threat to his opponent. Naruto knew around 24 elemental or otherwise offensive ninjutsus, but none of them were strong enough to contend with Roshi. He had spent most of his time building his foundation and mastering simpler ninjutsus. Against a normal shinobi, Naruto would have had hundreds of options at his fingertips. In the face of this threat, a raging Jinchuriki with command over such an offensive weapon as magma itself, there was only one option open to him. How many tails can you force me into, Kurama? At once, 3. But it will be incredibly painful. And dangerous. Neither of us will be in control, Naruto. Slowly more tails will appear until Roshi is dead, and then who knows how long it will take for your rage to disperse. I don't see how we have any such choice in the matter. I can't touch him and he doesn't seem like he's going to be stopping anytime soon. If you were to start with 2, there is a chance you will retain control into a third tail. It will be a gamble that you may lose, Naruto. Do it. Naruto's palm whipped up to catch Roshi's punch. A light red film of chakra bubbled down from his hand and encompassed his body. 2 tails sprouted up from behind him and he could feel his bloodlust spike. The power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune flooded him and it was hard not to smile. Roshi didn't hide his own animalistic grin and he chuckled. The monkey says that it's glad you actually decided to show your power. We were getting bored just making you dodge, kid. This isn't my power, Roshi-san. But I thank you for giving me and Kurama the chance to show you our might. Naruto tightened his grip as he twisted and spun, slamming Roshi into the ground behind him. His foot lashed out towards the neck of his foe, but only met dirt upon its descent. Roshi was fast and as the two clashed together the wind tore into the obsidian beneath their feet. Cracks began to form and the air heated up as the magma below was slowly revealed. Naruto paid it no mind as burning tears made their way down his cheeks. His empathy was heightened whenever he used Kurama's chakra, and as he fought he bonded with Roshi in a way that he had only done so with a few others. Hiruzen, Kakashi, Kabuto, Anko, Itachi. Roshi was the next person Naruto felt that he understood. Roshi was proud, cynical, wary, tired of the shinobi system. He respected strength and also had a strong sense of fairness. The veteran from the rock village held no hate in his heart for Konoha for him. He was testing him. That being said, if Naruto didn't meet his expectations then the Jinchuriki had no fear about killing him. Naruto wasn't safe, but neither was his situation hopeless. It was a battle of expectations. 2 Jinchuriki hadn't clashed like this since the last great shinobi war. Naruto struggled to maintain his taijutsu style amidst the swirling desire to slug it out. It was a constant war between his instincts and Roshi, a battle on 2 fronts. Roshi seemed to have an easier time of it. Roshi wasn't giving him room to back up, to breathe. Naruto was struggling. The power was amazing but uncontrolled. He could feel more of it leaking through his seal, a burning sensation emanating from his navel that was quickly becoming a dangerous distraction, his senses warring for his attention. Sounds started to dim. His attention narrowed down onto the fight and his vision began to tunnel. It was getting harder to pay attention to his surroundings. His sight was beginning to blur. Red. Red was consuming his sight. It was hot. So hot. Hot all over. Hot inside him. Burning. Blood. Blood and iron. He tasted blood and iron. Screaming. He heard screaming outside and screaming inside. He was screaming. And roaring. He saw his foe. The monkey and man in front of him. He heard a voice yelling inside his head. 2 voices. His voices, but he didn't care. He fought harder than he was. He didn't care if the red-hot rock touched him, it would just wash off of his chakra. His power. Stone melted from the heat, and their battle raged over liquid stone. He was hurting too. His foe was strong and quick, but the more angry he himself got then the stronger he himself became. The monkey and man was starting to defend. To back away. To run. He couldn't escape. No one could escape him. Two more foes appeared. Silly. They didn't even have second halves. They didn't have a partner that would strengthen them. No animals, just men with shiny metal headbands. They waved their arms, and as he roared and swung to destroy them, he heard a third voice, one he had almost forgotten from his memories. What does a shinobi fight for? Naruto. The village. Itachi sensei. Konohagakure. The village hidden in the leaves. The leaf symbol. The symbol on their heads. They were Konoha-Nin. He was Konoha-Nin. His claws stopped gripping their throats and released them. They didn't flinch, though he could smell their fear. His hands had branded their necks from his corrosive chakra. Not foes. Friends. And just like that, he started to remember who he was. Agent Konoha. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto Uzumaki. Shinobi of the Leaf. He roared and felt the wind send a gale into the clouds above. He could feel the cloak around him as he wrestled for control. Very good, kid. Keep it up. I thought we almost lost you there. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Even now the impulse to lose himself to that much power and have it flow throughout him was ringing throughout him. Just let loose, it seemed to whisper. Just let go. He willed himself still and eventually felt the cloak dissipate. He panted for a little bit and looked up at Torun and Fu. They stood at attention, motionless. Still loyal, it seemed. How are you two? Fine, sir. We apologize, we thought we could assist you. He was surprised to realize they thought that they'd be punished more for stepping in. They didn't realize that they were the only reason he hadn't lost himself. Lost himself to hate the very thing he was trying to fight. At ease, I'll find some way to reward you both when we return. Excellent job. He saw the surprise on both of their faces and would have smiled if he didn't feel so guilty. As it was, he turned so that he could face Roshi. The older man was standing there sans chakra cloak, with his arms crossed. Did I pass your test, Roshi-san? The first one, kid. Speak. Naruto almost groaned. After that he was exhausted and just wished that he could lay down, and sleep, and cry. It seemed the Iwa Nin wanted him to be drained when he gave his spiel so as to have the upper hand. Fine. Naruto would give him that comfort. Fine, but I'm sitting. And sit he did. He squatted on the hard stone beneath him and grimaced as it nearly burned him. Their fight from a few yards off had heated the stone up for dozens of feet beyond, it seemed. His throat was strained, along with everything else, and burned from overexposure to Kurama's chakra. It seemed that the short and sweet would have to suffice. He bet that was what Roshi wanted anyways. I want you to defect from Iwa. You can come to Konoha, but if you are hesitant about that, just going off on your own will suffice. I can offer you protection one way or the other, if you want. I want to gather all the Biju and their Jinchurikis together. The world has used them as pawns for too long. I would see us all united together as a family. And maybe reform the shinobi system. That's fucking crazy, kid. It's impossible. No. No, it's not. Well, not impossible. Think about it. Before Mito Uzumaki there had never been any Jinchurikis. Before Konoha there hadn't been any villages. It's entirely possible to effect change. It'd just be hard, Roshi-san. But, if you fight for us, I'll fight for you. I give you my word and I can't go back on my word. That's my nindo. Roshi looked him over, and Naruto gave him the courtesy of not calling out all of his feelings. Kabuto insisted that Naruto not do so when he had a chance of convincing people without making them think he could read minds. Apparently, he had somewhat unnerved Kabuto back when they had first met. Why now? Iwa and Kumo are going to ally to fight against Konoha. So you want me to fight against my own village to protect your own? No, you don't have to join Konoha. And, I wouldn't ask you to fight your own village, but, if the others join us, they might fight Iwa. Just as I hope you'd never ask me to fight Konoha, you aren't a weapon. Neither am I. We're people and the beings we carry deserve to be treated as people too. Don't you think? I'll be hunted down. Onoki won't be so keen as to let me escape like this. I can protect you. Naruto silently held his eye contact. Roshi was a better fighter, by far more in tune with Goku than Naruto's seal allowed him to be with Kurama. This was the hardest sell, by far, of this arrangement. I'll prove it. I have some business to take care of here and then you can come back with me and I'll show you some hiding spots where they'll never find you. Where you don't have to be a part of either village. I'll take care of you until a safe place for us exists where we don't have to fight. Please, Roshi-san. Roshi laughed, but he maintained his seriousness. He didn't falter in the face of Roshi's skepticism. It wouldn't do well to be shaken so easily. Not when everything depended on convincing Roshi that leaving was the best choice to make right now. I'm serious, Roshi-san. Do you know what'll happen if you stay here? If you assist in this campaign against Konoha. Open war. The Sandaime, the god of Shinobi, knows about the talks between Iwa and Kumo. Suna is our ally. Do you really want to be used as a weapon again? To put your life on the line just to kill Shinobi for the sole fact they are from another village? To fight until you are killed and then have Son Goku just sealed away in someone else? Someone who may not be as respectful or caring as you are to him. Quote. What business do you have here? He met Roshi's eyes head on. Only brutal honesty would work to secure his friendship. I'm going to decimate Iwa's invasion force. Roshi raised an eyebrow and smirked. You're going to die. You do that. And what happened to not killing Shinobi for the sole fact they're from another village, eh? Was that just a line? I won't die. I promise. I'm not as trained as a Jinchuriki as I am a Shinobi, and I don't want to. But, if I can end the fighting with one assault then that has to count for something. It's hypocritical, kid. I don't really see any other way, Roshi-san. I don't like it, and hopefully by doing this I can stop more fighting. I have to hope that I will, at any rate. Why are you trying so hard? What do you gain out of this? I get to make my friend happy. Roshi laughed and then sighed deeply. Naruto could tell that he was deeply conflicted. The Jinchuriki of the Yonbi was a veteran of the last Shinobi War. He had faced against Konoha killed Konohan Shinobi. And if he had any friends in Iwa, some of them probably died against Konoha. But, Roshi was disillusioned with the village life. Onoki saw him and his fellow Jinchuriki, Han, as weapons only. Assets. He was tired of it. Naruto understood how he felt. He also felt guilty that he was using his feelings to manipulate him like this. But, he was given his gifts for a reason. To use them for this end, to stop the wars and protect the Biju. What would you do if a Jinchuriki denied you if they stood against your goal? Naruto frowned. He could sense what Roshi wanted to know. It wouldn't do well to be optimistic. There was a fair chance that any number of Jinchuriki would feel more loyalty to their village than to each other or to the Biju. B was like that. Naruto could sense that he'd never willingly betray the Raikage. He'd have to be honest. Then I would have to free the Biju of them. If they are determined to keep the Biju subjugated and imprisoned, I'll kill them. He wasn't proud of it, and yet he could see Roshi's approval all the same. For the first time since they had started talking, it seemed that Roshi held some affection for Goku more than he had guessed. Show me what you can do, kid. Torun and Fu wordlessly stepped up on either side of him, ready to depart. Very well. Follow me. The four of them vanished from the rocky field. And that is how the socio-economic layout of the end-era warring clans lead to the formation of the shinobi villages and inspired the First Shinobi War, and how Tobirama Senju's insight into jutsu and seal creation spearheaded Konoha's first victory on a worldwide scale. The class was silent, and even the instructor, Iruka Yumino, was giving him a weird look. This usually happened whenever Sai answered a question or gave a verbal report, and he could never understand why. He always answered the question as completely as possible. Well, yes, but we won't be talking about court village politics for a few months, Sai. You could have just stuck on basics of the Nadaime's background, but still, good job. A few students giggled, and Sai wondered what sensei had said that was so humorous. Thank you, Iruka sensei. That concludes my report on my shinobi hero, Tobirama Senju. Said went to his seat. No one clapped. They were quietly whispering about the pale weirdo, and talking about how annoying and desperate he was to be a teacher's pet, and the like. Sai had deduced a while ago that most of the students were unsettled by him, and instead of trying to emulate him were content to perform at their mediocre level. Little did they know his report was styled on a deep cover briefing. Iruka gave him another cursory glance before looking out to the whispering and jittery class. It seemed no one wanted to compete with his report, as boring as they were whispering it was. How about you, Hinata? The girl squeaked, and Sai was proud at how he withheld the urge to scoff. The Hyuga heir was the meekest person he had ever met. The exact opposite of his target. Sai slowly side-eyed Sasuke Uchiha. He seemed to be reading his textbook. He was a model student, and a promising shinobi. It seemed that Konoha-sama had as good instincts as Danzo-sama when it came to selecting future recruits. Why else would he have placed Sai in such a deep cover, with the sole objective of observing and protecting the Uchiha heir? If he wasn't the future clan head, then he'd have been a perfect candidate to abduct and initiate within Root. My shinobi hero is Naruto Uzumaki. The class gasped and Sai felt his focus shatter. The words that left her mouth were so unexpected that he had to listen to the frenzied whispers around him to confirm that she had said, Naruto Uzumaki. Hinata Hyuga knew Naruto Uzumaki and idolized him. How? Not that it was any surprise that Konoha-sama was worthy of such praise, but no one should have known about him. At least, not an academy student. He saved me. Fr from, AK Kumo Nin Ninja. Everyone was whispering frantically except for the Uchiha and the Nara heir. All the students knew of Naruto Uzumaki. The Sarutobi ward. The weirdo. The one their parents warned them to avoid. Some even knew his forbidden nickname, the Demon Brat. None of the students knew what he had done to be so reviled, but they assumed it was justified. It seemed that none of them were keen to question their parents' opinions. The Hyuga struggled to go on, and Sai felt himself become torn. Hinata carried on her report, tearing up in shame and frustration as her stutter became worse, as her classmates snickered and mocked her. Eventually, Iruka was forced to let her sit back down halfway through her report as she couldn't even get a word out. She quietly sat in her seat and hunched over as she quietly sobbed. Sai saw her attitude and timidness as an enormous weakness, but she was loyal to Konoha-sama. She adored him enough to brave the ridicule from her peers. If this had been a report on the origin of hand sealing and she had messed up a sentence, she would have shut down after the first comment. But she had stood up there for more than 20 minutes and only sat down when instructed to. To most, that wouldn't mean much. But from Hinata Hyuga, that had been a declaration. A line in the sand. No one else had witnessed or understood what had passed in that class today, but Sai was there. He saw an opportunity. A potential asset. Even if she didn't become a powerful shinobi, she was the heir to the Hyuga clan. That made her a powerful player and potentially one that Konoha-sama could easily control and manipulate. He sat through a few more juvenile reports of famous shinobi and how cool their jutsus were before class was dismissed. Hinata remained in her seat as the others left. Sai stood up and walked up to her. Hyuga-san. She flinched as if struck and looked up at him, her lavender eyes red and her face blotchy. He saw fear and apprehension in her face, and he knew that his next sentence would matter for the rest of their interaction. He had to prove himself as different from the rest of the class, had to make it clear to her that he wasn't like the others. That she could trust him. He had to foster a rapport. He's my hero too. At first she didn't seem to react, just stared at him. He didn't know what had prompted him to engage with her. This was entirely outside of his mission objectives. Perhaps it was her potential usefulness. Sai didn't dare think it was because with a singular shared interest she now had more in common with him than anyone else in the class. That fact had somehow overridden his disdain of her temperament. She continued to stare at him and he tried to smile. It felt a little forced. Uncomfortable. But then she softly smiled as she sniffled. She began to tear up again and he had almost feared he had made a mistake. Thank you, Sai-san. But then her smile grew. The first time he had ever seen her actually smile at someone else. Would you like to tell me more about how Uzumaki-san saved you? Kakashi spent most of his time either training or going over missions for the Anbu. In another life he would have much preferred to have stayed an Anbu captain and just run missions with Team RO. He probably would have been forced to step down to be a sensei for Naruto, and if Itachi had completed his genocide, probably sensei for Sasuke as well. In all honesty, he was happy things had gone the way they had. Being here for Naruto, it had made him feel normal. As normal as any high-tier shinobi could be. It was grounding to be a role model for a child. To watch them grow. To love them and have that love returned tenfold. Kakashi hadn't thought about ever having children of his own, but now, if he met the right person, he wouldn't mind retiring and starting a family. If he survived, of course. If he didn't, then all the Hitaki clan secrets and techniques would be passed on to Naruto. That wouldn't even really be that bad, either. His father would have liked Naruto. They had a lot in common. No, he didn't regret all the times he had taken Naruto out to the park. The times they had eaten together in Ichiraku. Teaching him, training him, sparring with him. Talking about his parents. When Naruto was quite a bit younger, and his empathy manifested as nightmares in his sleep, he would calm the upset youth with tales of his father's intellect and his mother's power. Of their love for each other, the village, and of him. He eventually had gotten their old copy of the tale of the utterly gutsy shinobi, and Naruto had fallen in love. Kakashi knew that Jiraiya was going to be so pleased when he learned that fact in the future. That being said, Naruto had started to become more independent. Taking the Junin exams made that impossible to ignore. He had done better than Kakashi had, and Kakashi had been a few years older when he had made Junin himself. He was proud of Naruto. Every positive influence in his life came from his decision to be involved in taking care of and guiding the boy. That was the exact reason why he had diligently combed the village for 3 months to find the root headquarters. It had become a training of sorts. Danzo was smart, and the last base Kakashi had saved Tenzo from had been dismantled and relocated. It hadn't been easy to find the new headquarters. It had been even harder to hide his search from anyone else. Kakashi had wanted to find out where Naruto had been running off to his agent Konoha, and Team RO had been wondering where their old senpai was disappearing off to whenever he was off duty. Of course, spending his time locating his younger brother's hangout spot was a rather normal and understandable thing to do. Finding the base far underneath the Hyuga compound was rather ingenious. As long as no stray jutsus or flares of chakra went off, then root was literally hidden right under the nose or, well, eyes, of the village. The new base was upgraded. Security was rather strict and well controlled. Well manned as well. It took a few hours to make any progress into the base at all. Yet, Kakashi was rather confident that he now knew what Naruto had been up to recently. Sitting behind a desk that had pictures of the boy with those closest to him was all the proof Kakashi needed. Hiruzen had found a replacement for Danzo en route, it seemed. The old man had gone behind his back and allowed Naruto to not only further entrench himself in the politics of the village, but become the leader of its most dangerous organization. This is what Naruto couldn't tell him. What Hiruzen had been comfortable enough to leave him in the dark about. The Sandaime seemed to think that he could choose when and what he told Kakashi about Naruto. Perhaps the Hokage had forgotten who Kakashi was. He was the Anbu commander of the village. This sort of confidentiality was unprecedented. He was supposed to be the second most informed shinobi aside from the advisors. The way things seemed to be going, it seemed that Naruto had taken that spot. He'd gladly remind Hiruzen of his position. He couldn't do anything less when it was Naruto's safety at stake. He finished surveying the room, and left a small scroll on the desk. It'd be good to let Naruto know his security wasn't as airtight as it should be, and he'd also appreciate the ramen when he had vetted the safety of the scroll. Itachi stared down Yagura Karataki, the Yondaime Mizukage. He was short, very short. Gray hair that swept down one half of his face. He wielded a large spear with 2 hooks on the end, and a large flower attached to the larger hook. He had a pinkish scar underneath his left eye. He regarded the two of them with the air of a cage, with a confidence that he could defeat them both and make it out alive. Their only advantage is that perhaps he wasn't aware of just who Itachi was. Biwa was now aware of how reckless he had been earlier and was seeming to regret it. I never thought you'd dare show your face back in the village, Juzo. I didn't want to necessarily. I had a mission, Yagura. The Mizukage looked at the 2 lifeless bodies of his hunter Nin and scoffed. Your actions betray your death wish, Juzo. I am ready and prepared to take you and Itachi Uchiha on at once. Ready yourselves. Biwa gulped next to Itachi. Well, there goes surprising him with your genjutsu, I guess. The next moment passed quickly as suddenly the trees around them were flooded with a mist that carried the foreboding power of a biju behind it. It was only thanks to his Sharingan that Itachi was able to see the red claws swiping for his face. He leapt back, noticing that Biwa had blocked with his sword the executioner's blade, now sporting a large gash that almost disconnected the top third of the blade from the rest of its body. The swordsman swore and dove behind a rock as a blast of chakra nearly tore his head from his body. Itachi was hard-pressed to assist as the Jinchuriki appeared in front of him. 3 red tails sprung from a tortoise-like form, and he realized how in tune Yagura was with his biju. They were working in perfect tandem. I'm one of the first Jinchuriki to have perfect control of my demon. Do you realize your folly now, Uchiha? Itachi didn't deign to respond as he dodged a rapid onslaught of attacks from the Yondaime Mizukage's arms, legs, and tails. Even his elongated jaws would seek to snap Itachi's limbs in half when they got too close. Itachi frowned and quickly summoned a shadow clone. The instant it appeared, a large bout of fire burst from its lips as the original Itachi was forced to block a punch from the berserking cage. As Yagura was sent flying back, a film of coral began to grow and spread over his body. He could feel it growing out from the clothes and his skin where Yagura had landed his blow, and it was quickly overcoming his whole body. Before he had the chance to think of some way to escape the living prison, Biwa reached him and cut its growth off with his massive sword. That's Yagura's coral fist technique. It's important to not let him hit you. Really important. Biwa's head turned and Itachi saw him. See what had made Itachi panic. Yagura was on all fours, balls of black and white chakra manifesting in front of his mouth. They condensed into a single orb, and then Yagura's maw encompassed the mass of chakra. We have to move. Hold on. Yagura let the projectile fly, and with an inhuman cry Biwa drew his sword in its path. The legendary blade met the chakra missile and a mighty explosion rang out. Itachi was able to see how the projectile had been sent up into the air, but as the smoke cleared he saw Biwa speared to a tree by his own blade. The hilt laying disconnected in his hand. Blood flowed from both his stomach and his mouth, and Itachi knew in that moment that his partner was dead. His brain just hadn't accepted it yet. Itachi took a step forward and then Yagura landed before the both of them. Itachi panicked for a second. The thought of hurting Naruto and failing Sasuke, breaking through his conditioning and making him lose control for the slightest of moments. It was enough for his Mangekyo to activate and the black flames of Amatsuru to unleash upon his enemy. Yagura collapsed to the ground, the fire burning through his chakra cloak, and Itachi felt an intense pity for him. An intense pain radiated from his eye, and he felt blood seep down his face like tears. The chakra drain from that technique was quite considerable. He needed to work on it more. Master it. Itachi, it seems you were more of a match than I. Was. Biwa coughed up blood and grinned. In that moment he resembled a true shinobi of the bloody mist. I want to die here. In this land that I've been from for too long. Be at peace. Itachi knelt down and placed the handle of Biwa's blade into his hand. The swordsman smiled as his hand gripped the hilt. His eyes closed and he passed on. Itachi waited for a moment longer before he silently rose up from his position and proceeded to leave. Leader wouldn't be too happy. He also wasn't excited about losing Biwa. He had been quite tolerable as a partner. Perhaps Madara would find some way to convince another 7 swordsmen of the mist to join, as long as he wasn't paired with someone annoying. Or overtly bloodthirsty. Mei Terumi entered the room quickly. She checked to make sure that she hadn't been followed and tapped her foot 3 times when she confirmed that she hadn't. Growing up in the village of the Bloody Mist hadn't been easy, especially for anyone with a Kekkei Genkai. Having to didn't help at all. She could have fled when the bloodline purges had begun, but this was her home. This was the home of all Kiri shinobi, regardless of what caste they belonged to. Running wasn't an option. So, she instead formed an insurrectionist cell. Gathered a group of other like-minded traitors. She was in the midst of planning a coup. It was slow going, because if she included the wrong person they'd all die, and any hope Kiri had of changing from its current course would die with them. She had gathered her trusted. Those which would become the lieutenants and generals of her rebellion. Organized a safe house to meet in any emergency. Losing a member of their group was one such emergency. She had just gotten the message from Ao when she had sensed Hunter Nin outside her house. It hadn't been easy, but she had managed to lose them. Her tension had only increased on her journey, and she was one wrong sign away from burning down the building with her lava release. Terumi-sama. She twirled around, kunai aiming straight for the jugular before she registered Ao's voice. Her right hand stood stone still, faithfully submissive, sure that the one he had sworn allegiance to wouldn't mistakenly strike him down. She wondered how calm he'd have been if he realized how close she was to killing him in that moment. Oh well, it didn't matter. The village was infiltrated earlier today and one of our men didn't survive. He was one of the Hunter Nin Yagura sent off after the infiltrators Juzo Biwa and Itachi Uchiha. Uchiha. Is that the one that defected from Konoha? Was the Kubikiribocho recovered? Indeed, ma'am, to both. It seems that Yagura has decided the next wielder should be Zabuza Momochi. I'm sure he'll report that to you later himself. But there is more. Due to the nature of the infiltrators, Yagura himself came out of his tower. She couldn't help but gasp in shock. Yagura hadn't been sighted within the village for over 3 months, his paranoia making him believe a group of traitors were out to kill him. It hadn't been the most convenient. If Yagura had left the cage tower, and now had seen him. So, were you right? Did you see him? I didn't. Yes. Yagura Karataki is under a powerful genjutsu, he is under someone else's control. Mei almost felt her legs fall out from below her. The ramifications of this were unbelievable. It was one thing for a Jinchuriki to become a tyrant and go on a bloody rampage, but this. Someone out there was destroying her country. And they would pay. It's time to up our game. Ow. Summon the others, we need to make a plan of how to proceed. Of course, my lady, did you have something in mind? A few ideas. Kurenai laughed as Asuma grinned at her impishly. They were in a veranda in one of the few gardens within the Sarutobi compound. She loved spending time with him, but he was always a bit more expressive and open when they were within the clan compound. She didn't mind too often, it just gave her another reason to come and stay within the gardens. Asuma's nephew, Konohamaru, was laughing and playing with some monkey summons in a nearby field. They spent quite a few of their dates looking over the child. It seemed that his usual playmate, Naruto, wasn't quite as available as he was before. It didn't surprise her. The boy deserved to be made Junin, and once again her thoughts had wandered to the blonde Jinchuriki. She could see Asuma looking at her with a knowing glint in his eye, and she sighed exaggeratedly. Really, Asuma, you can't tell me anything about him. Oh, interesting, you've given up trying to trick me into spilling his secrets. Yes, I have. You're far too clever and you are quite obnoxious whenever I try. She smirked as he chuckled sheepishly. Why do you want to know so much about him, Nai? Her mind flashed back to the Junin exam. What Naruto had said to her in the moments leading up to her defeat. Her fears of getting too close to Asuma. He said something to me during the Junin exam. She was surprised to see that her words seemed to resonate within him deeply. He sat up and looked at her with a very serious expression. Whatever he told you, it's real. You don't. He held up a hand as she opened her mouth. Have to tell me what it was. It's obviously very personal, but did I ever tell you what made me quit being one of the 12 guardians for the daimyo? She shook her head. That story had been her most sought after one after Naruto. It would make sense that they would be connected with how stubbornly he danced around the topic. I had come back after the destruction of the group, when only me and Shiraku had survived Kazuma's coup. I was going to lead its reformation, because I couldn't deal with my dad. I was messed up in a lot of ways, and the day I was to return to the capital, Naruto showed up. He was only like 2.5 years old. This was right after Dad adopted him, made him his ward. Of course, I hadn't actually met him at that point, but he looked up at me, and he told me he knew why I was so angry. That I was scared. Scared that I wouldn't make Dad proud, that I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. Asuma stopped to wipe a few tears and Kurenai silently took his hand. The kid, he just knew. He could just tell every piece of darkness floating around in my head. Hearing it all, I broke. Dad found me sobbing on my knees, Naruto trying to hug my side and crying with me. It was the first time in a long time I remember him hugging me. The three of us just sat there for what felt like the longest time. And when I started to calm down, Naruto asked me to come read to him. I was supposed to leave for the capital, we all knew that, but he asked me to come with him. So I went with him. And I stuck around, and I don't regret it. He looked up at her and she was touched by the warmth in his eyes as he looked at her. Whatever the kid told you, you can tell me when you're ready. And whatever it is, I know that you're strong enough to handle it, Kurenai. I can't wait to see you when you do. She felt tears gather in her own eyes and she leant forwards into his embrace. She desperately wanted to tell him the truth, but her voice just wouldn't come. So she hugged him tightly and held on. Soon. She would tell him soon. That was a promise, one she made to herself. Working papers was an acquired skill of Kabuto's, and one he was quite proud of. He had perfected writing simultaneously with both hands. But his speciality was in his memory. Eidetic. He had performed the necessary operations to make it so. Kabuto never forgot something he read, ever. Suspending a day doing all of Orochimaru's paperwork was one of the greatest intellectual heists in living history. Of course, the information by itself was harmless. You'd have to have a truly in-depth knowledge of the Snake Sannin's protocols and code words to read between the lines. Kabuto had been there upon their creation. He had pioneered the bureaucracy of the village hidden in the sound. He was Orochimaru's right-hand, head scientist. He was the Snake Sannin's one weakness. One day he'd act on Naruto-sama's orders and bring Orochimaru down to his grave. Someday. But not today. Today, he was gathering possible recruits for Naruto's route. At least, the information of Shinobi of interest. What he wouldn't do to burn this place to the ground. But, he was loyal. And loyal Shinobi only burnt down enemy bases when ordered to. Or forced to. He had been worried that Orochimaru would have sniffed him out. Would have seen the shift within him. Would have known that the will of fire had been reignited. Kabuto had made his peace that should he be found out, he'd take out the Sannin or die trying. That was when the man had smiled and asked what he knew of the Akatsuki. Admittedly, that wasn't much. Sasori had recently joined in the past few months along the same time that Itachi had. Naruto hadn't been happy to be informed that Itachi was now a part of an S-ranked terrorist sect. Still, there wasn't any way to learn more about the organization yet. That was, until Orochimaru had disclosed that he had been invited to join and was planning on using this opportunity to obtain the Sharingan. He had left soon after, but had tasked Kabuto with reorganizing their scheduled research, and to prepare an appropriate vessel should he not be able to acquire the body of Itachi Uchiha. Kabuto had gotten to work for both masters. Moving Orochimaru's plans forwards moved forwards Naruto's at this point. Both would learn invaluable data from the research of this base. The study of the cursed seals would surely interest Naruto-sama at the very least. It would do good to keep an eye on the snake's plans, so as to not be caught unawares. There'd come a point when Orochimaru finally realized he had defected. It was his duty to do as much damage as he could while getting away with it until that point. For Konoha. For Naruto-sama. Iwa and Kumo have decided to invade us, Kakashi. His Anbu commander stood at attention before him across from his desk. So we are not adhering to formality at this time, Hokage-sama. He sighed at the edge in Kakashi's voice. He knew exactly where this conversation would lead and he dearly wished that he didn't have to go through this again. Kakashi Hatake was a perfect shinobi except when it had to do with Naruto. He had vehemently protested Naruto's promotion to full Junin. Hiruzen himself hadn't wanted to proceed, but his hand had been forced. Naruto had done exemplary. There was no way he could hold the boy back after that public of a showing of skill. It would have only made things more suspect. So far the boy's abilities had been sufficiently kept secret, but Hiruzen felt strongly that it was coming closer to the day where the world would know Naruto Uzumaki wasn't going to let things be. He was going to shake up the standings and fight for what he believed in. His will was as infectious as that of the Shodaime. Kakashi, I am sure that you have a very important reason for this talk, but I am in the middle of managing some important papers concerning the trade routes with Suna. Naruto is the new leader of Route, isn't he? Hiruzen regretted giving up smoking, as he was sure the smell of his favorite tobacco would have done something to cull the migraine that was building in his forehead. Yes, though how you are aware of this I am sure I will not be happy with. He's just a boy, Hokage-sama. He's only 7. Minato would be. It is due to Minato's actions that things have come to where they are today. He watched Kakashi tense at his words. The Hatake was almost too loyal to those who had passed sometimes, it was his greatest flaw. Naruto Uzumaki is not a normal child. I thought you would have made your peace with that by now. Sheltering him too much will not aid in his growth. It will not help him. The boy has the skill and knowledge of one many years older than his age. The only thing holding him back at this point is his body, and that is not something we can fix. So yes, he is somebody I can intrinsically trust to keep Root on the right path. Someone who is nearly impossible to interrogate. Someone who is as close to the living will of fire as I have ever found. I have taught him to be a good and honorable man. I have taught him everything I wish my sons had wanted to learn. He is my legacy and someday, he will be the Hokage. You know that to be true. He wasn't just trained for the position, he was born for it. The only uncertainty is if he lives to see that day come. Do I wish to have him lead route? Be a Junin? No, I do not. But, if having him lead route means that he has to spend more time within the village while placating his need to defend his home, then I will water that seed. I will walk with the boy so that he will come to me when he needs to. Trust the boy, Kakashi. Trust him to use what we and Itachi have taught him to keep him safe. Kakashi just stared at him before he stiffly nodded and leapt out the window. Hiruzen groaned and re-summoned his Anbu guard back to their positions into his office. Send for Danzo. I need to speak with him. Naruto stood with Roshi on top of a cliff overlooking the first wave of the Iwa army. The mountains of Iwa were rocky and barren, much like the ones in Kumo. The camp was based in a valley sheltered by the foothills of the mountains. The might that was assembled seemed to have been numbered in the 900s, with more trickling in every hour. 900 shinobi. At least the numbers were in his favor. I have a plan, Roshi-san. One that will largely only work once. After this, my strategy will likely not be able to be used to this effect. Kid, I have no earthly idea of what you're talking about. Naruto nodded and looked back to the assembling army of the Iwa shinobi. My father once tore apart an Iwa battalion. It was at the Battle of Canobi Bridge. He felt Roshi stiffen and look at him. He sensed the dread and realization, a flash of hatred before it seemed to disappear as the man exhaled. Quote. Of fucking course you'd be his son. I'm guessing that's supposed to be a secret, eh? I'd appreciate it, Roshi-san. Let's see if I can live up to his legacy. With that, Naruto began to run up the mountain behind them, swiftly climbing towards its peak. He could sense Roshi resigned and guilty for what was about to happen. In all honesty, Naruto was dreading what was coming. The large force of people below in the valley were radiating a larger pool of negative emotions, but to Naruto, that was their lives. Their daily troubles. Their grief. Their fears. By the dawn, most of it all would be gone. For the village, kid. For the future. Chapter 10. Naruto rested on an outcropping of rock just shy of the peak of the mountain. He was quite high above the Iwa camp. It was his first time so high up, and it was almost spellbinding. He couldn't see individuals from this height, and his empathy couldn't distinguish anything more than a general collective of emotions. As if a great beast slumbered in the valley below. He closed his eyes and allowed his senses to expand. Kurama's chakra started to leak into his body. His features became more animalistic and he started to cry. Tears slowly began to fall down his face before he suddenly stood up. He would need amplified empathy for what he was about to do. You sure about his kid? Absolutely. He stepped back and took a few calming breaths before he burst forwards and over the edge of the cliff face. He gave one clipped shout of excitement before he took control of himself and recentered. Kurama's chakra supercharged his momentum and he flew high up into the air, farther than he would have ever been able to jump on his own. As gravity took hold and he began to fall, he slowly arced down towards the camp. The wind blasted against him as he fell faster and faster. He felt his own doubt and fear squirming in the bottom of his stomach. His intended path was a dangerous one with a strong possibility for failure. He'd have to fight harder than he ever did before. He couldn't fail here. His plan was reckless on a multitude of levels. Itachi would have called him an arrogant fool. Kakashi would have reminded him that he didn't have to always do things on his own. Hiruzen would have told him that the risk was not worth the reward. Yet, Naruto knew in his heart that all three of them, if they had his abilities and were in his position, all three of them would do exactly what he was about to. It was unspoken that the will of fire carried with it the proclivity of martyrdom. It just took experience to know when it was worth it. And there's only one way to get experience. His plan had a higher degree of success than his mentors would make it seem. First of all, his enemies were not suspecting an attack, at least not from one person, and not from above. Of course, their sensors would have a barrier that would cover their heads as a precaution, but that wouldn't do much if they weren't already prepared. It also wouldn't do much for them if an entire army rained down at once. It may just take up the majority of his chakra, but, in the end, it was worth it. Just before he entered the range of the sensor barrier, he put his fingers together. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Smoke covered the entire sky above the Iwa camp as 2,000 clones appeared at once and descended upon their unsuspecting prey. The sensors were suddenly overwhelmed with data, as where there was once nothing, there was suddenly 2,000 enemies falling down on their heads casting jutsus. The Naruto's first used a wind jutsu that safely slowed their fall and which repelled any of the projectiles thrown up at them. As they landed, the first objective of his mission was achieved. Incite panic amongst the Iowa forces. The great emotive feel of the camp quickly flared into a sea of fear. There had been no warning of such a large force moving against them, and suddenly an entire army was attacking in the midst of their camp itself. Naruto didn't blame them. He was sure that the nature of this attack had never been encountered before. If they didn't rally, then it would be a massacre. It was up to him not to give them that chance. The Junin quickly reacted and began to engage the enemy and tried to marshal a counterattack, but the army was primarily Chunin and Genin. Young Iowa shinobi that were in no way prepared for this ambush. Fighting broke out, and each time a clone was popped, Naruto gained the memories of the young ninja that he had killed. Very quickly, it started adding up to the dozens. That wasn't to say that his enemies weren't capable. After the landing, every clone relied more heavily on taijutsu to take out their opponents. The original Naruto tried as hard as he could to stay away from any fight. He had maybe a handful of jutsus he could cast left. Fires raged through the tents. Naruto, all of him, acted to make as much chaos as he could. If no enemies were nearby, Naruto's clones were planting explosive tags and incendiary tags throughout the camp, taking out as many tents, weapons depots, and medical tents as he could. Tears flowed down the faces of his clones, and at this point it was no longer just a side effect of Kurama's assistance. His heart was torn, but this is what a shinobi should do. Defend his village at all costs. His clones acted together in units, systematically facing down whatever foe stood in their way. Naruto had read the stories of war before, he read the Anbu reports, had listened to the Sandame's first-hand accounts. If this force of shinobi had met up with the troop from Kumogakure, then open war would break out with Konoha in the crosshairs. They couldn't be allowed to mobilize. This had to stop here and now. You are acting as what the shinobi system would have you act, Naruto. You are little more than a weapon now. Was this necessary? All this death? Yes. It has to be. It's too late to back out now. His grip began to slip on his kunai as all the blood seeped down the blade and drenched his hand. It was little more than a black, congealing goo comprised of the blood of many different enemies. Dead shinobi. Dead people. Once you finish this, we will see if you believe it was truly necessary. Naruto could sense Kurama's disappointment, but he didn't have the time to feel guilty. Now wasn't the time to second guess. It was as he said, it was truly too late. Naruto, the original, was heading to the outskirts of the camp amidst a group of 5 clones. They had laid their seals and were stealing whatever they could along their route to safety. He watched the destruction around him and saw some deaths from 2 different perspectives. The lives he watched clones take were the hardest, for when those clones fell, their memories would stand out more and truly blurred the lines of his reality. He had killed before, but never this much. Never to this degree. He saw himself reflected in fearful eyes as his blade bit into the neck of a shinobi beneath him. He saw amputated arms and legs, heads which his wind chakra cut through so cleanly. Soldiers screaming as they tried to hold the blood back in their bodies. Gripping their wounds as if it could possibly mitigate the pain that was inflicted. A genin pleading for mercy as his teammates die before him. A young woman pleading over the trembling form of her lover as a group of his clones descended upon them both. The young couple holding each other in their arms as their blood pooled above the earth. Naruto became familiar with a multitude of responses people have upon their imminent death. Loyalty, fear, cowardice, pleading, denial, rage, despair. Dozens now dead asking him, why? Why was he doing what he was doing? Who was he to them that they deserved such a slaughter? He saw himself, wherever he turned, with crimson eyes and blood-soaked hands. Tears slowly trickling down his face. He didn't see compassion in his own face, he didn't see hatred, he saw resignation, he didn't know if that was worse. Continuously gaining memories from defeated clones was quickly making Naruto lose hope. It added to the finality of his actions. The memories would be his forever, each one adding more and more to the fact that he had made a mistake. The Iowa shinobi reacted well. After the initial surprise, their troops began to rally. The few censors left, the handful that he hadn't managed to kill in the initial bout, were quickly gathering intel for their commanders. Troops were being rallied and organization was being brought back from the carnage. It was only expected after all. No shinobi force of this caliber would succumb to a surprise attack for long. Naruto's forces were combing the camps, but eventually they would realize they only needed one good hit on each enemy. Already, the rate at which the clones were being popped was rapidly increasing. Naruto had hoped that it would have taken them a little longer to regroup, but there was nothing he could do now. The Sandaime had taught him that the most important lesson in a pitched battle was turning strengths to weaknesses and anticipating enemy movements. With that in mind, Naruto grimaced and took out a signal seal. He attached it to his kunai and threw it as high as he could. It sailed through the air, and just as it reached the apex of its trajectory, the seal went off, a blinding red light flashing over the entire camp. There was a moment as all of the clones paused to take in the signal. The clones' greatest weakness was that it only took one good hit to stop them, making taijutsu the most efficient manner of dispelling them. There was an easy counter to this. The clones reached into their pouches and started igniting explosive tags whenever anyone got within melee range. Suddenly, throughout the camp, explosions sung out. Body parts and blood flew through the air as unprepared ninjas screamed in agony or died without a sound. The order, which was starting to restabilize, quickly broke down once more as the attack upon the camp escalated further. As the smoke clouded the skies, water flooded the ground and wind cut through earthen walls that were raised in defense of the onslaught. Chaos thrived. Screams filled the air, screams of defiance and of pain. He alone witnessed every violent act that took place. The living memory of an entire army. An army's worth of blood on his hands. It was too much. The weight was too much to bear. Naruto continued to fight as he cried. By his reckoning, 15 minutes had passed and already hundreds of lives had been lost. He had lost 3 of his 5 guards and they were almost at the edge of the encampment when a cry rang out. He saw a young girl, maybe a few years older than himself, screaming as a large earthen sphere collapsed within itself. She sobbed uncontrollably as one of his clones stepped up behind her and aimed a kunai for her neck. He felt his eyes widen, and before he knew what had happened, he was holding a kunai in the middle of a cloud of smoke. The girl looked up at him in absolute confusion and despair after he had popped his own clone. Her hair was singed on the edges and she had cuts all along her arms. Her pink eyes looked up at him, lost and overwhelmed. She was swirling with grief, shock, and depression. She was defeated. Completely. Why? He couldn't answer. The truth tasted like ashes on his tongue. Kuretsuchi. A group of 6 Junins stepped up to him and his 2 guards. The girl gave no reaction, only sobbing quietly. The man leading the Junins growled and readied to attack. Naruto wasn't surprised to sense that he was her father. There was a distinct familial resemblance there. Let her go. Naruto quickly dragged her limp form up and held a kunai to her neck. Stop. The Junin stopped their advance, but didn't lay down their arms. That's the granddaughter of the Tsuchikage, boy. Should any harm befall her, the full might of Iwa will fall upon you. Naruto tensed and withheld the urge to scream. I can't leave her. If I took her hostage, that's leverage that'd be able to hold Iwa back. Force them to come to the table. Naruto. Kidnapping is beneath you. Is this truly even something you'd consider? I don't have a choice, Kurama. He ignored Kurama's scoff and tightened his hold on Kuretsuchi as she began to realize what position she was actually in. Dad. Please, Dad, don't let them take me. Naruto sensed her father's heart break and the rage that was slowly but surely growing within him. Would his father have felt that hateful should he have fallen into danger? Was love that powerful to create such hate? We could talk about this, boy. Let her go and you can still make it out of here alive. You're a terrible liar. You've already signaled your forces that I'm over here. The real me. Naruto sensed as much from the man. This revelation seemed to resonate something within the Junin across from him. He watched as the man grinned darkly. The Raikage mentioned a rather interesting shinobi the Hokage seemed to have taken a vested interest in. One which seemed to have some jutsu connected with information gathering. The books aren't out yet, but there was an entry in the bingo book for you. Thank you for showing your face to us. My face alone won't endanger me. Your threats mean little to me. Now clear the way, or I'll kill your legacy. It was mere moments that he was done speaking that he sensed the decision to attack manifest. He ducked underneath a stone spear and hopped off of the earth beneath his feet that turned into a spiked pit. Kuretsuchi was struggling in his arms as he dashed alongside a burning tent. His two guards stayed behind to hold back the tide, but the group of Junin made short work of them. Naruto was finally able to knock out Kuretsuchi, but barely avoided an earthen spear sent for his head. Naruto bit back a curse as he got closer and closer to the edge of the encampment, but he could sense the girl's father, Kitsuchi, gaining ground behind him. The smoke made each breath burn. Blood from a wound on his face was starting to bleed into his eyes, and he realized that his regeneration was extremely taxed. He was running dangerously low on chakra, and he couldn't use any more of Kurama's without endangering himself. Maybe this whole idea hadn't been the best plan. I got you. Naruto felt something slam into his back and knock him against a tree. Kuretsuchi fell out of his arms and he groaned in pain as the impact knocked his head and made him lose focus. He could sense the intense hatred emanating from the protective father, but his vision was getting worse by the second. You think you can come into our camp and just walk away? I hate to tell you this, kid, but you were sent on a suicide mission. You were never coming back from this. Your Hokage ordered you to your death. Naruto heard a kunai taken out of a holster and tried to lean forwards and ready a defense. He could sense the attack was going to be for his neck. He could do this. I'm not done yet. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. I refuse. But even as his arms rose up to defend, Kitsuchi just changed course and kicked him in the chest. Naruto gasped for air, but none came. His lungs were screaming for something but were just stuck. Naruto felt as if he was suffocating, and just as his body adjusted and was about to breathe in, another kick stole his breath once again. You had your hands on my daughter. My daughter. Naruto groaned as a large fist hammered his face. Naruto heard something crack but couldn't even tell where the pain was coming from. He blinked and realized that he was laying on the ground, body limp. He could see one of his arms, his left arm. His head was resting on his left upper arm. His left hand was palm up, covered in blood. But even through all that he could see still the scar that almost cut his hands in half. I can't die. I promised Itachi that I'd be safe. I promised Kabuto. I promised Kurama that I'd free the Biju, Kakashi, Hiruzen. A foot flipped him onto his back, and through his blurry vision he saw the blade poised to take his life. Kurama. Save your breath, kid. It's not over yet. Naruto blinked in confusion and witnessed Kitsuchi's body freeze. He then stood up and holstered his kunai. Konoha-sama. Shall we evacuate? Naruto blinked once more. Then he started to regain his senses and his vision started to clear. Fu. Yes. Shall we terminate this enemy? As the Fu-possessed Kitsuchi aimed a kunai at his own throat, Torun appeared besides Naruto and began to assess him for wounds. It was still hard for Naruto to focus, and yet as his body began to ache more, his mind cleared. He'd never felt so weak before. No, restrain him and take the girl. We need to rendezvous with Roshi and make our escape, but wipe his mind. No memories of this night. Fu nodded and began to carve a sealing matrix into Kitsuchi's hand without question. Torun slung Kuretsuchi over his shoulder and picked Naruto up in his arms. Allow me to assist you, Konoha-sama. Naruto saw the handprint from his Jinchuriki cloak still red and raw on Torun's throat and felt an immense wave of guilt hit him. Thank you. Both of you. Torun and Fu both nodded. Torun dashed out of the clearing and Kitsuchi's body fell limp onto the ground as seals spread over his form, keeping him in a state of paralysis. Behind them, the Iwa camp was filled with the sounds of war as the rest of the clones continued their assignment. It wouldn't be over for another hour until the final clone had been defeated. But Naruto and his allies were gone without a trace. A week later found Hiruzen sitting in his office with Danzo. The past year had been ripe with changes. The loss of Itachi and the majority of the Uchiha clan. Naruto's leadership of Root and Junin exam. One of the more subtle changes, however, had been Danzo himself. Hiruzen couldn't quite put his finger on what exactly about his childhood friend's behavior was so different, but it was actually starting to annoy him. You've been acting off lately, Danzo. Any particular reason why? His old friend chuckled lightly. It's always so refreshing whenever you lose your patience. Oh, I'm sure it just delights you. Hiruzen furrowed his brows and leaned forward. You've been silent since the Uchiha massacre. It seems as if Naruto has taken control of Root from you seamlessly. That's too much for you to believe. I know better. Danzo simply smiled and nodded along. I know it seems weird, Hiruzen, but the truth is that I have no inclination or motivation to step beyond what has currently been assigned to me. Perhaps that comes from the new fire that the boy has lit inside you. I admire your intuition, but I hope I can put it to rest. Besides, this meeting was to discuss the massacre of Shadow Valley. The propaganda department sure loves their poetic names. I will find out what you're hiding, Danzo. He sighed and dropped the topic. Yes. Shikaku decided that we should take ownership of the attack as a preemptive measure. The attack will surely cause Onoki to back out of any immediate plans, which will force it to abandon his plan and leave him trapped in this alliance. If we can somehow convince the Cage to stand with us in this alliance, we have a chance of actually forcing Kumo to commit. I believe you chose the wrong village to enter treatise with. Hiruzen stopped and rose a brow in question. I know you don't mean Iwa so, Kurigakure. They're on the brink of civil war, it's all but assured. Your own spies said that fighting would happen within the year. Indeed, but, with the events of the massacre of Shadow Valley having gone as they have, it's changed things. The boy almost died, Danzo. Of chakra exhaustion no less. He's still not ready to be a one-man army. No, he's still not capable of taking on an entire army alone. But, he has more than enough power now to be a powerful bargaining piece. It's of the utmost importance that we keep his safety assured. Danzo rolled his one visible eye and frowned for the first time in months. Sarutobi. There are ways to utilize the asset you have under your command as well as mitigate the danger he faces. Konoha, the village, has accepted responsibility for the attack. The credit for the mission's success should go to Konoha, the agent. They saw his face, he did not have his mask. Nor did he have a Hittite. No headband, no leaf symbol. From now on, he should always go on missions masked. This strategy won't last forever. As soon as a bingo book with his face gets posted, our entire village will know who he is. The spies will spread the word after that. Then we need to either spend time thinking of an alibi, make one, or train the boy to the point where it doesn't matter. Quote. Very well. Did you have something in mind? Something of the sort. How much of sealing does the boy know? Difficult to say. He's had no formal training, and our books only go as far as intermediate level. Danzo nodded. Sealing masters were few and far between. It was an art that was still barely understood by the average shinobi. Perhaps it's nearing the time to guide him towards his legacy. I'm sure his parents left behind some sealing tomes. Hiruzen went to snap back a reply, but Danzo beat him to it. And yes, studying without the presence of a master is dangerous, but we don't really have the luxury of time to wait for your lecherous student to finally make a reappearance. The boy needs to learn, and the perfect opportunity to gift it to him is nearing up. Hiruzen looked out at the trees slowly starting to turn colors in the face of autumn's approach. Yes, it's almost the day, isn't it? You remember nothing. Kitsuchi stood stone still. He gave no sign of further weakness, no hint of disobedience. Standing before his cage, who happened to also be his father, he acted every bit the loyal shinobi and dutiful son. Even if the interrogation and reprimanding was further enraging him. I have no recollection of the attack, but my squad have all pieced together a timeline that ends up with me tailing the assailant to the edge of camp. A large force of clones intercepted them behind me, and by the time the fighting was finished they discovered me, incapacitated. Yes, well, we've both been through the debriefing. I'm asking rhetorically, how in the world you let your daughter be taken? Don't give me that look, boy. Your failure could very well cost you her life. He grit his teeth but held his silence. Onoki sighed. Onoki was old, and getting older by the day. The last of his hair had turned white, and recently his back began to ache up whenever he exerted himself. Kitsuchi and Onoki had both been grooming Kuritsuchi to become the next Tsuchikage. She was family. Their legacy. His daughter. How are we planning to proceed, Tsuchikage-sama? Onoki grunted as he looked at the missives on his desk. Unfortunately, our options are severely limited. This engagement has started off terribly, the worst defeat we've suffered in nearly 2 decades. 500 shinobi dead, 50 of which were jonin. No enemy casualties. Now is not the time for action. Kitsuchi remained still and silent as his father got up from behind his desk and walked towards him. At ease, son. The Sandame Tsuchikage sat down beside him, and for the first time, even to Kitsuchi, he let down his walls and sighed. Showed his weakness and worry. If we want to secure her safety, we can't attack. Not with an army. I'll send an envoy to meet with Sarutobi, get his demands. We'll have to back out of the joint invasion with Kumo for the meantime. The Raikage won't like that. What have I told you about wasting your breath saying things that don't need to be said? Of course he won't. I imagine he'll be very frustrated. The likelihood of us working together may be jeopardized, but, if we take our time, I may find some way to push them further to our corner. Kitsuchi nodded along, knowing that nothing his father said could ever leave this room. I'll assemble a team to try and extract her. We've also lost contact with Roshi, so I'm recalling Han to the village. It's very important that we see how the balance shifts after this victory of Konoha's. We've compiled a drawing based off of all the descriptions. Does it do anything to bring back your memories? Kitsuchi took the drawing from his father's hand and looked at it. A young man with spiky hair, animalistic features, and tears running down his face. Why the tears? Because every single witness from the attack commented that every clone was crying the entire time. It's either some kind of psychological play or a side affect of his ability. I'm certain that he truly was a Konoha shinobi though. How can you tell? Besides Konoha profiting the most from it. His taijutsu. One of the veterans of the last war started noticing similarities with the Uchiha interceptor style. But he didn't have any Sharingan. I know, and that worries me the most. This was about more than just stopping an invasion, this was a reveal. A single shinobi who can grow to fight armies. A shinobi of that caliber hasn't played on the field for years. Perhaps Kuritsuchi can tell us more about our new enemy if she is recovered. When she is recovered, father. Yes, of course. Forgive me. You're dismissed. Who is he be? Answer me. Now. A promise is a promise. Yo, don't make me act lawless, yo. A roared and flung his desk out of his window. Mabui, his secretary, shrieked as he demolished his office for the 5th time that week, and Darui pinched the bridge of his nose. That runt ruined our plans. And don't think that Sarutobi, that old monkey, isn't going to capitalize on this. I wonder if he planned this. You're being too paranoid. Bro, just take it slow, yo. B. This is an order. Who is Agent Konoha? Send me out if he attacks, otherwise he'll break your backs. Darui stood up in A and B stilled and looked to him. So he's a Jinchuriki then, B. If you're the only one who can take him down in battle. Yo, I never said that, nah. The boy's just one cold killer. A glanced at Darui and then back to B. So that's what it is. You're being all chummy with the enemy just because he's a Jinchuriki, B. Grow up. He's an enemy shinobi. Sarutobi probably put him up to building that camaraderie with you. Wake up. He's a threat to our village. B crossed his arms and actually kept his mouth shut, and that only made him more. He couldn't believe that B was standing up for a foreign shinobi, one who had just laid their plans to waste. Fine, well, we have another Jinchuriki to use, B. Since you won't contribute, you're dismissed. Mabui, stop your nagging and summon Yugito. I have a mission for her. Mei Terumi looked at the report in her hand and back up to Ao. This, Konoha issued this statement. Ao nodded seriously. Hi, Terumi-sama. They have published their stance on the massacre of Shadow Valley. They sent an elite operative, Agent Konoha, out to preemptively strike an invading force from Iwagakure, and their lone agent succeeded. This could be what we needed. We need allies' manpower. If we had a shinobi on our side that could create an army, we could attack Yagura directly. We don't have the resources to last more than 2 more years. It's now or never. Do you really think a full-on assault at this stage is wise? If we have additional firepower. Yes. If we let Yagura set the pace of this war, it could drag on for years to come. The sooner we can stop the bloodshed, the stronger Kiri will become. Ao nodded. Shall I head to Konohagakure myself? Don't bother, I'll go myself. Inform Zabuza to hold off on his strike. When I return, we'll strike as one. With Agent Konoha or without. As you command. Good luck, Terumi-sama. Kuritsuchi opened her eyes, and the first thing she did was take note of her surroundings. She'd had dreams of the battle the past few days, and she knew for a fact that she had been induced into a state of unconsciousness during her travel from the camp. She was in some kind of cottage. The windows outside showed trees of a forest surrounding the building. That could have been a large number of places in the elemental nations, but she had a good idea of where she ended up. Welcome to Konohagakure, Kuritsuchi. I will be your warden for your stay. She twisted around into a defensive position to find a young man with a blindfold on sitting at a small table. He had short, black hair and some facial scarring sticking out from beneath the cloth covering his eyes. He wore the outfit of a leaf shinobi minus the headband. Who are you? She tried to access her chakra but realized that she couldn't channel it. She couldn't even feel it. Her eyes grew wide and she began looking all over herself before seeing a black mark on the back of her left hand. That doesn't matter. You can call me warden if you'd like. I'm just here to watch over you until my boss decides on what to do with you. Your boss? Do you mean the blonde-haired kid? With the red eyes? Warden's head seemed to tilt to the side and he looked towards her, red eyes. Burning red eyes with slits down the middle, and he was crying. Is that your boss? Oh, actually, I suppose that would be an apt description of him. Yeah, that is my boss. He took you hostage to better negotiate with your grandfather. He sealed your chakra so that you wouldn't run. He really thought just because I didn't have chakra I wouldn't run. Already she had determined 15 different escape routes out of the cabin alone. Warden grinned and took a sip of tea before speaking. Oh no, he knew you would run. It just so happened that babysitting you and being ready to stop you actually sounded like really good practice to get me back in shape. I've only just recently recovered from the loss of my sight and I need some time before I can be cleared for duty. A chakra-less genin near Chunin is a wonderful marker. Please don't go easy on me. Kitsuchi didn't know how to react to that at first. Anger, frustration, injured pride. The thought that this blind Konohan shinobi was speaking down to her, looking down on her. It really made her blood boil. Oh, I'm going to make you eat those words, asshole. You're going to realize how outclassed you are by the end of the night, I guarantee it. Excellent, it sounds like this plan works out for the both of us after all. Dinner's almost ready and then we can begin. Naruto sat with Roshi a few miles from Shisui's cottage. The two of them hadn't spoken much, especially while Torun and Fu were around. After sending the two of them off to alert the Hokage of his success, Naruto had dropped Kitsuchi off with Shisui for him to guard. He had then found a spot for Roshi to camp out at for a while until they could meet back up again to chat. After a few days of sleepless nights he had reported to Hiruzen that he was going to patrol the perimeter of Konoha, which led him to meeting back up with Roshi. They sat in a small campsite at the mouth of a cave. Roshi was more comfortable among the rocks than the trees, and Naruto could understand that. They had fallen into a sort of an understanding. They weren't friends, not nearly, but Jinchuriki united together. It was a first for the history books. Roshi cracked his knuckles and spoke up. Alrighty kid, I'm not going to stay here for much longer. I understand. I can supply you with some locations that are safe if you'd like. Naruto inquired. Roshi shrugged and took the offered leaflets and thumbed through them. He tossed 2 into the fire but held on to the rest. Thank you. Some of these have some real promise. Of course. I meant it when I said that I'd help you. I mean, you're also free to stay here. Patrols don't come here. Hey, thanks, but I'm not comfortable hanging around here. Especially if the girl manages to stumble upon me. It's better for both of us if I lay low. I have a few spots in mind. If I hear anything going on, I'll come check it out though. Okay. Naruto kind of sighed and sagged a little in disappointment. He understood and agreed that it was best for Roshi to be on the move, but hanging around another Jinchuriki was he never felt entirely as understood before. Or connected. Well, if you're going on your own, I have some information for you. If you ever see anybody walking around in black cloaks with red clouds, get out of there. They're a group known as the Akatsuki. I know of them. Onoki hired them out from time to time as third-party mercenaries. Naruto frowned and actually growled at that. Idiot, there's no way he doesn't realize they're bad news. He probably just doesn't care, kid. What's so bad about them? They're all S-rank missing nin, and their true goal is to gather all the Biju. Roshi blinked and whistled. Well shit. Okay, yeah, that's something to keep an eye out for, I guess. I'll really keep my head low then. He stood up and tucked the papers Naruto had handed him away before putting out a fist. Until next time then, kid. Right now. You're going immediately. I thought you were gonna go in the morning, and I had questions for you. Roshi squatted down until they were eye level and he bumped Naruto's fist. Look, kid, I don't really enjoy people. You're somewhat tolerable, And that's great, but I'm not one to sit around mincing words. Get me? Yeah, I understand. If it's about what you've done, no one can judge you guilty or innocent. That's something you gotta figure out for yourself. You're the one who has to live with it. He shrugged and stood up. I'm a war vet, kid, my hands aren't clean either. Now, if it's a question about being a Jinchuriki, there's nothing I can tell you that you don't already know. You're much farther along than I was when I was your age. Just keep up the hard work. If I have something for you, I'll come back here, and if I find another one of us, I'll bring them along with me here. Sounds good, Roshi-san. Good luck out there. You too, Naruto. With that, he was gone, and Naruto was left alone in the clearing. Kurama, did I make a mistake? Single quote. I don't know, kiddo. But, if you did, the only thing you can do now is do good to make up for it. Yeah, okay. Thanks for not judging me. For being honest and just for being my best friend. Single quote. You're welcome. And, thank you as well. Sai didn't know how it had progressed to this point, but he had started to eat his lunches with Hinata Hyuga. It was an unforeseen occurrence. It ate into the time it took for him to write his mission reports, and yet she was practically a perfect dining companion. She sat there, ate her food, and was content. It was really quite a good arrangement. She also was quite observant. He only had to ask her a few questions about their classmates, and she quite willingly began to describe them all in great detail. It seems that even though she never talked very much, it wasn't for lack of things to say. It appeared to Sai that once she felt comfortable with someone, she would open up. Of course, there were some things that she was timid about, such as taking criticisms about her skills, but on topics such as Naruto she was quite outspoken. Having grown up spending lots of time with the other clan heirs, she was quite a valuable source of information in learning more about them. Sai's dossiers on the clan heirs nearly tripled in volume after the first 2 days of spending time with her. She was also not a bad shinobi, at least, she had great potential. She made for a perfect spy amongst the students who would ever worry about what Hinata Hyuga overheard or saw. Shin was also quite excited that Sai had made a friend. Shin didn't seem to care too much about her strategic value and cared more about how she was giving Sai opportunities to make connections, but if that was what made Shin proud of him, then Sai was happy enough not to correct his misconceptions. Of course, that also meant it was too good to last. Or that's what went through his mind when suddenly a group of students walked up to him, and Hinata. Leading the pack was Ino Yamanaka and Sakura Haruno. Hey, Hinata, how are you doing? Ino smiled as she plopped down, quite obviously glancing at Sai measuringly. He gave no sign of detection though, as Sakura sat on the other side of the Hyuga. It's been a while since you stopped eating with us. We were just wondering what you and your buddy talk about. Say, was it? She asked him without even turning her head from the flustered girl between her and Ino. Sai. We don't talk. We eat. The two girls didn't respond at first, seemingly shocked at the response. He's right. We just eat RF food and focus on the lessons that Iruka sensei just went over, a small lie at least on his part. He'd already memorized all the useful information that Chunin Yumino had to impart to the class, but taking the time to silently observe the rest of the class and his target while still somehow building rapport with the Hyuga heiress wasn't a bad way to spend their lunch break. Okay. Well, do you mind if we join you then? Ino glanced between him and Hinata as the shy girl glanced at him for his approval, and he nodded. Just as long as no one is overly. Holy crap. Look at his bento choji. It's stocked. Suddenly, the Inuzuka and Akamaiki were sticking their heads over each of his shoulders, peering down at his lunch, which was full of food that Shin had packed for him. It has all the necessary. Could we try some? Sai frowned and pulled his lunch closer to his chest. No, you cannot. What? Why not? Sai adamantly defended his own lunch time, and before he knew it, the break period had passed. He'd done more talking today than he ever had before in a single day. Shin would certainly be proud about that. He might even give Sai a treat in tomorrow's lunch. Anko dragged Kurenai by the arm, up the stairs to the top of the Hokage monument. She had finally found out that Naruto had returned to the village, and it was her very own mission to get him to fill her in on his absence. Kurenai was getting dragged along because she'd been with Asuma every night for the past week and needed to spend some quality time with her friends. Or at least, That's what Anko had decided for her at least. Slow down. We could go faster if you weren't dragging me along, Anko. Oh. Relax, Nai-chan. You'll be fine. She didn't even have to look back to feel the glare Kurenai was now leveling her way. Don't call me that. Ah. Is someone embarrassed about their gross little pet name? Anko loved getting under Kurenai's skin. She took pride in how easy it was. You promised not to talk about that, after I promised not to kill you for spying on me and Asuma. I wasn't spying. I wanted some dango. Just because you're on a date doesn't mean I can't go to my favorite restaurant. TCH. Whatever, Anko, you still haven't told me who we're looking for. Come on. Kurenai, who do you think I'd actually care to talk to besides you? Kurenai took a moment to think. Naruto. Bingo. And look, there he is. She pointed up towards the Yondaime's head where she could see 2 feet dangling off the forehead of the statue. How do you know he'd be here? Anko hummed to herself as she leapt through the air towards the statue, still holding on to Kurenai. Lucky guess. He comes here sometimes, and he usually doesn't like company. Kurenai immediately tore her arm back and gave her a scandalized look. Well, if he doesn't like company, then why are we? Hello. Anko-chan, Kurenai-chan. Going to interrupt? Hello. Naruto-san. Are we interrupting you? Anko wrapped her arms around Kurenai and rested her head on her friend's shoulder and grinned. We wanted to chat, Naruto-kun, it's been too long. He smiled up at them and it was wrong. They both immediately separated and sat on either side of him. It was normal practice not to pressure a comrade if they maintained their composure, even if it was known that they went through a traumatic experience. But, when they could not maintain that composure, that's when checking in was mandated. In Konoha, in particular, comrades were encouraged to investigate each other's mental well-being amongst themselves, and if it was not enough, then they referred their teammate or friend for psychological treatment. It was to foster teamwork and loyalty amongst the forces, and so far it had worked pretty well. The 2 women quietly sat down on either side of Naruto and just sat there. As they moved, he seemed to shrink into himself, going so far as to pull his knees up to his chest. Anko was especially worried for him. They just sat there as the sun slowly began to set. You 2 know I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, right? Anko stopped thinking for a second. She had known. Everyone knew everyone except the kids. Demon brat. Stain of the Sarutobi. Monster. I think I became a monster. I know how the villagers feel about me. Even now I can still feel it. Even you 2 are guilty that you used to look down on me. Anko took this time to really look at Naruto. His blue eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun, the wind blowing through his wild, blonde hair. You're a brat. A kid. She put her arm over his shoulder and gently pulled him into rest against her side. I'm the snake slut. The traitor. Hopeless wannabe. Those names, they don't mean anything. But the feelings behind them are real. His voice was barely more than a whisper. People feel that way about me, and I did something on that last mission that would just prove them right. Kid. People think that I'm still loyal to Orochimaru. Every time I summon a snake, use my taijutsu, even though it's for the betterment of the village, they see it as a further sign of my betrayal. They don't matter. Kurenai scooted closer and started to run her hand through Naruto's hair. He stilled at her touch and froze, looking out at the village. Naruto. What Anko is trying to say is that no one knows you. We feel guilty because we didn't know you. It's an awful thing to have to live with that burden. Worse than the struggles we've lived through. Ignorance is more powerful and more dangerous than any genjutsu that I know, but you helped my dearest friend, when you didn't have to. You've given Anko a chance at an unmarked life, a life free from the shackles of her past. It has done so much for her. She smiles now and I can see how much she means it. Kurenai locked eyes with her over Naruto's head and Anko felt her heart beating in her chest. For the first time in years, her eyes began to tear up no matter how hard she tried to remain calm. You truly saved her. You saved her when no one else could or would. That makes you one of my heroes. The child quietly began to shake, and they both could tell that he had began to cry. He pulled his knees as tightly to his chest as he could and they both leaned in and took him into an embrace. You saved Asuma too. You've done so much for the most precious people in my life, and I have no idea how to thank you for that. I just wanted to help. We know, Naruto-kun. We know. You are a good person in a place that demands awful, terrible things. We do it for each other. Anyone who tries to say otherwise, any shinobi that speaks ill of you for fighting for the village is a damned fool. Can you tell us what happened? Quote. Promise me that you won't think I'm a monster. Anko rested her forehead against the side of his head and whispered into his ear, you could never make me hate you, kid, you're stuck with me and Kurenai now. Quote. I caused the massacre of Shadow Valley. I'm Agent Konoha. Kurenai looked at Anko, knowing intrinsically that they were not cleared for that knowledge. That they should immediately go and report this, refer Naruto to psychiatric counseling. They both felt him shrink even deeper into himself, and Anko sighed and quietly spoke. Quote. We won't tell, Naruto-kun. But, you have to talk to Hokage-sama and get some help. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have told you that. It's alright, kid, it's alright. We're here for you. Let's just sit and watch the sun set. He nodded and slowly relaxed into their hold. And they watched the sun set on the village. It was later that night that Naruto walked into his apartment and was surprised to see the kitchen light on. He slowly made his way into his home and was surprised to see the Hokage and Kakashi sitting at the table, waiting for him. There were 3 bowls of ramen, a stack of scrolls, a weird tri-pronged kunai, and a cake. What's this for? Hiruzen smiled warmly. Welcome home, Naruto-kun. Don't you know what day it is? Kakashi smiled and pulled his chair out for him. It's your birthday, little guy. Happy birthday, Naruto. You're 8 years old. Chapter 11. Naruto sat patiently at his table staring at the scrolls in front of him. 3 empty bowls of ramen sat in front of him, though Kakashi and Hiruzen were taking their time in finishing their food. Kakashi somehow being the slowest, even though he took the fastest bites so no one could see behind his mask. Naruto had long decided that his older brother was probably just really attractive under the mask, and that's why he hid his face so people wouldn't make a fan club for him or something. Actually, thinking back on it now, that was probably not correct. It's amazing how childish he had been all those years ago. 1 year ago. Everything all right, Naruto-kun? Yes, Gigi, I'm fine. That happened every now and then after a mass dispelling of clones. His sense of time would be murky for a while as the memories were compacted and sorted. He did some quick mental math: 1200 hours of memories a day for around a year, around 270 years worth of memories. Most of those memories were studies, of course. It made everything very surreal at times. It was only thanks to Kurama that he was able to process all of the information without melting his brain. I'm fine, Gigi. Oh, I already said that. Hiruzen paused and put down his chopsticks, Kakashi doing the same. You seem distracted, Naruto-kun. Naruto lowered his eyes and sighed. I know you're worried, but I'm okay. It's just the memories, I feel weird. My first response is almost always, I don't know. Childish. Kakashi quipped. Hiruzen sighed and Naruto jerked back as if slapped. Why yeah. You are only 8 years old, Naruto-kun. Shinobi your age are demanded to be more mature, but they are forgiven any impulses that are normal for children to have. It's not expected of you to be as mature as me or even Kakashi. You are uniquely situated due to your position to face struggles unique to your own experience. Not even the second Hokage could have foreseen someone utilizing his technique to gain as many memories as you do in a day, as much knowledge as you now have at your fingertips. He reached over the table and patted Naruto's head, and Naruto felt that familiar warmth spread through him. He never felt more understood and appreciated than when he was with his family. Their love, their trust in him only made him more determined to make them proud. To make their disappointment in him disappear entirely. To make the hate for him in their hearts into nothing more than an empty void. Well, for your birthday, Naruto-kun, we decided to give you your parents' notes on sealing. As well as the Uzumaki clan sealing scrolls. Naruto gasped. His inheritance. Part of it? Sure, but still. He teared up in joy. And I can use them. Read them to your heart's content, Naruto-kun. We'll try to arrange for a seal master to approve your final examination, but I'm sure you'll make us proud. Kakashi smiled and ruffled his hair. You already do every day. I know Minato and Kushina would be so happy with how much you've grown. Tears left his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, it was not because he was enhancing his empathy. Welcome to Konohagakure, Terumi-san. Thank you, Hokage Dono. Please, Sarutobi is fine. The woman across from him was dangerous. Cage caliber. He could tell before she even entered the room. There was a point when Shinobi gained enough skill and power they just acted different. They gained a nuance in their body that was almost impossible to hide from Shinobi of the same level. S-rank Shinobi came close and many of them neared or achieved that status simultaneously, but Cage were a clear step above. What brought you to seek aid from Konoha, Terumi-san? She smiled, and yes, it was quite charming. Any lesser Shinobi would read pure pleasantness and compassion. Except maybe for Naruto himself. Very dangerous indeed. Hiruzen could see through her act though. She was calculated with every breath. If he'd been 30 years younger he'd be smitten and Bawako would have been furious about it. Don't be so coy, Sarutobi Dono. Are you truly surprised that I'm here after recent events? I'm surprised that the news of our recent trade agreement with the Land of Snow has already reached the shores of Kirigakure. He received a flat look for his response. He knew why she was here, but he was in no way going to give her any opening to take the upper hand in this little chat. I don't have the luxury of time right now, Sarutobi Dono. No, she did not. The rebellion in Kirigakure was putting up one hell of a fight, from what his spies had reported, but they achieved little than keeping Yagura back to a stalemate. Then you best get to the point. Very well. I've read the reports of Shadow Valley. I have come to Konoha to seek the service of Konoha the agent, of course. If you lend me the aid of that single shinobi, the rebellion could end the bloodline war in a matter of weeks. Or you could use the chance to isolate my asset and assassinate him at the behest of Iwa, Kumo, or any of their allies. How much did they offer? She laughed, and she was back to the courtesies demanded of political maneuvering. I'm not trying to add more parties than absolutely necessary. Working with you guarantees Suna's neutrality. Iwa will assuredly bide their time for the best opportunity to strike. Kumo is paralyzed by your treaty and desperately searching for allies to get them out of it. If I did work alongside them and kill your shinobi, you and Suna would ally with Yagura. I dare say that'd turn the civil war into the fourth shinobi war. Just like that. Neither of us wants that. Agreed. Although, it would be yet another shinobi war that Konoha would win. As we have won all the others. I'm not intending to be the first Hokage to lead the village into a defeat. Which is why you are the only logical choice to seek aid from. You are widely known to prefer peace amongst the villages, or that's what you claim. The massacre of Shadow Valley is almost equivalent to the carnage the late Yondaime Hokage inflicted upon Iwa that forced them to accept the armistice which concluded the Third Shinobi War. Clearly Konoha is capable once again of participating in another shinobi war, but, ending the bloodline war may prolong peace for years to come. What do you offer? She smiled, comfortable that his acceptance was a foregone conclusion. Cute but not entirely correct. An alliance between our villages, with the caveat that Kiri will not join any wars for the next 5 years. You expect to be weakened that significantly. It will take time to weed out any remaining loyalists and rework the infrastructure of the village. Of course, all of our relief trade will be offered to Konoha to profit from first. You've prepared to give me everything I could want, Terumi-san. Is the deal acceptable? Of course, although, there is one more problem remaining. Mei blinked and pulled back the hand she had just been about to extend. Oh, have I missed something? He nodded and smiled at her. He could not match her attractiveness or charm. No, his weapon presented itself in other charismatic ways. A grandfatherly grin. Oh, yes. The Land of Water will require a new daimyo, and our own daimyo, Oda Hideyoshi, has 2 sons. I'm sure he will be more than pleased to instate his second son as the daimyo of the Land of Water. Unacceptable. Terumi dropped her act and shook her head. Allowing our new daimyo to be the son of the Land of Fire's daimyo would be more or less a political takeover. It would more or less make the Land of Water a vassal state of the Land of Fire. I've been taken advantage of so many times by treaties. They are just so difficult to enforce in our shinobi world. So, I'm forced to take further action. You just said it yourself, Terumi-san. Where else do you have to turn? Kiri has not acted against Konoha recently, while Iwa tried to invade you. Kiri was our enemy numerous times in the past. I understand you wish to recreate bonds of alliance between villages, but many would shy away from trusting the Bloody Mist. I'm giving you the best deal you will find. Her face now gave nothing away. It was a polite nod of her head that broke the stillness of the room. I see now that you are not as toothless as most would have me believe. I have not done you any disservice in the past, Sarutobi Dono. I'm feeling quite surprised that Kumo is allowed to renege on their treaties multiple times and I'm the one who must pay the price. He nodded and did not refute her. Kumo will be surprised to discover their actions have already resulted in reparations. They just don't know it yet. These are my terms. You may retire to your lodging to think things over if you need. Either way, before any deal is finalized, I will summon Agent Konoha to meet you. Why is that necessary? He leveled his smuggest, most grandfatherly smile at her and leaned back in his chair. Because Agent Konoha will lay every lie you've told me or haven't told me since we met on the table. Deny what you will, but the truth will be laid bare upon your meeting. She could not hide how unnerved she felt from him after that sentence. He had no walls up. She could tell he had full confidence in that fact. She regained her composure, thanked him for his time and then left the building. He had not anticipated this meeting. He had not anticipated the consequences of quite a few of Naruto's actions. The boy was acting on his own agenda, and while it had served Konoha's needs for now, he worried about when it eventually would be asked for the boy to go against his own wishes. He loved him dearly, but even he couldn't predict a scenario where losing Naruto as a loyal shinobi and as an asset would not irreparably shake the village to its foundations. The Hyuga incident. Information of Kumo's military and Jinchuriki. The Uchiha massacre. Danzo's conspiracies. His Junin exam. The massacre of Shadow Valley. The Jinchuriki of the Yonbi now wandering on his own initiative. He could be hiding in the land of fire for all he knew. If Roshi was discovered to be staying under Konoha's protection, hostilities would only increase. There was a reason for the Shodime's act of distributing the Biju to other nations, though Naruto disagreed on principle of using the demons as bartering chips. Now Kiri, a new more tolerant Kiri, could potentially be allied and reasoned with. All of this because of the boy's gifts. The problem, if it could be considered such, was that children don't stay children forever. The boy would develop his own codes and ideology. As of now he followed orders from his Gigi, but as Asuma showed him, children didn't always agree with their parents. A chat was in order. He needed to remind the boy that he believed in him. He'd also be instrumental once more in figuring out if Mei Terumi was trustworthy or not. His trust in the boy was unshakable. He believed that he'd turn out differently from Asuma and from Orochimaru. Naruto's power was what Konoha needed at its head. From its leadership. Whether she knew it or not, the future depended on the words of Naruto Uzumaki. If he said she was being honest, then he'd give her the aid she requested. Now, if she lied, she'd never make it out of Konoha alive. Cage caliber she may be. But he was the god of shinobi, his victory over her would be assured. Then Konoha would send aid to Yagura. Unpleasant as it was, if they took out the leader of the rebellion, it would suit them better if none of them were left to seek retribution or even worse, win their war without her and bear a grudge. He was tired of wars. Tired of sacrificing children to create killers. Tired of regretting his choices present and past. Hopefully, this wouldn't blow up in their faces. Naruto sat at his desk in the new route headquarters and stared at the scroll innocently sitting there. Upon his return he had been surprised to discover that someone had entered his office without express permission. After sending out agents to check if any root member had gone in or out, it had been revealed that none of them had. Torun and Fu then combed the entire office for 2 full days before admitting that nothing else had been tampered with and that it was not trapped. So, that left him sitting at his desk, idly poking and prodding it while also searching it for seals. This is the most childlike you've been in a long time. They cleared it as nothing more than a sealing scroll. It could be a trap. Some kind of weapon sealed inside. True. Do you think it is? Naruto examined it a little bit once again and shook his head. No, I think it's something else. Why? What leads you to have that feeling? Naruto stilled. Kurama knew why he was feeling that way, and was trying to hide it. Okay. Not hide it, but wasn't acknowledging it. Kurama needed to calm down whenever he was accused of hiding something. Naruto rolled his eyes as Kurama got more and more annoyed by his emotional processing. You know I can't control how I feel. Neither can I, so stop bringing it up. I'm not trying to hide it, I was trying to lead you to discover it yourself. It has to do with your empathy. Naruto was confused. He poked the scroll again and was even more confused about why it didn't feel threatening. How is my empathy attached to this feeling? A scroll can't feel. He could sense Kurama calming down and patiently waiting for him to think it out. No, but you can imbue feelings and emotion into items. Only the smallest amounts, but the stronger you feel, the stronger the resonance. You humans would call it retrocognition. You have started to hone your empathy without realizing it. So, I can sense the emotions imbued into an item. He could sense more than see Kurama nodding at him. Indeed, a very rare ability, and one that you need more practice with if you ever hope to use it beyond vague, gut feelings. I'm proud that you are moving along so quickly. I honestly never expected you to develop your empathy so quickly. What did you expect, Kurama-kun? Out of curiosity. Well, disappointment. I hoped I wouldn't be though, and, well, kid, you are more than I hoped for. You are my first only friend, ever. And I worry about you. You don't need to worry about me, Kurama. I do. I understand why you're doing what you believe that the only way to change the system is to act within it for a better position. I understand the logic. I just hate that you are the one that has to be the victim of it on my behalf. Naruto withheld the urge to vehemently deny he was doing it alone or that he didn't feel bad. He couldn't. Kurama knew how he felt. He always knew. They both knew each other and truly cared for each other. Sometimes, words didn't have to be said between them. Even now, he could feel Kurama's worry but also his resignation. His hate for anyone who hurt him. The strength of it was like a boiling sun. He cared for Naruto that much, to have so much hate for his enemies. It was sweet. He poked the scroll again and closed his eyes, a few tears leaking beneath his eyelids, and he channeled a smidge of Kurama's chakra to boost his empathy. Kakashi-ni-san. He quickly opened the scroll and unsealed it to reveal 3 steaming bowls of ramen. Awesome. He shouted as he did. Torun and Fu kicked down his door and searched for threats. No. And no. I'm fine. Sorry. They both turned to him and Fu tilted his head. Are you alright, Konoha-sama? You seem embarrassed. Aha, I might be a little bit. That's okay. I'm fine. Really, it's not a problem. I got some ramen from a friend. Very well, Konoha-sama. They both bowed and stepped back out and closed the door behind them. Kakashi's the best. He took the chopsticks that rested before the first bowl and begun to dig in. Wait, how'd he find my office? Naruto groaned in exasperation at realizing that Kakashi would know about Root now, and Hiruzen would chastise him about being discovered. How am I supposed to keep something secret when my brother, the Anbu commander, is spying on me when I'm gone? He fumed quietly as he ate his ramen and took out the few reports waiting for him on his desk. There were 2. Both were unmarked. He took them both in either hand and closed his eyes. He began to cry once again, as his empathy was boosted. Okay, the one in the right hand first. Feels sharp, excited, snake-like. Kabuto maybe. He opened his eyes and flipped the folder open and smiled when he was correct. It was from Kabuto. Awesome. Okay, notes about the cursed seal, interesting. Possible recruits. Orochimaru's research. Oh man, I hope he's doing okay. Speaking of Orochimaru, Naruto, we still have to deal with the last of that soul fragment in here. I'm getting tired of babysitting it. It's absolutely disgusting. Give me some time to figure out how to not just absorb all of his memories and then we can take care of that, okay? Fine, but please make it a priority. Will do. He quickly finished scanning through Kabuto's report, making note of crucial information, and then set it back down. Okay, now this one. Once more he heightened his senses and attempted to discern the identity of the sender of the report. This one is hard. Worry. Itachi. Naruto's eyes flew open and he began quickly reading through the paper. It was him. Finally, after so long. It had been months since he had received any word from him. He'd been worried to death. The report didn't say anything more than the information written down. There was only facts members of the organization, missions they'd undertaken that Itachi was aware of, such as a recent excursion to the Hidden Mist. Yagura. The Yondaime Mizukage was the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi. Itachi had beat him. Apparently, Yagura wasn't dead, but he was the leader of Kirigakure. Isobu is the Sanbi's name. He is rather timid, actually. Easy to get along with. He didn't like any of us fighting and was content to remain in the temple that father built for him. So do you think that he could convince Yagura to listen to me? If he knew that we both were working together. More likely than it was that Son Goku and Roshi listened to you. Awesome. Maybe I'll have a chance soon to send out Fu or Torun to go and speak with him. He felt Kurama's fear that their plan was impossible minutely lessen. Little steps. Naruto wasn't a fool, but he was confident that together they could save the Biju. And change the shinobi system. Shisui had been watching Kuretsuchi for a little over 5 days. Over that period of time she had attempted 10 escape attempts. Each one was done at different times, through different means, via different escape routes and all performed without chakra. She had been taught well for once a young. Shisui just wished that he could see her face every time he shunshined right in front of her and kicked her to the ground. Like right now. It's not fair. You shouldn't be able to use that jutsu if you can't see where you're intending to show up at. Tough luck. He said cheerfully. That was close that time though. You almost made it a mile from the cottage. Good job. She actually growled at him. It was such a refreshing experience after being stuck under Kabuto's polite yet curt care. No one liked to joke around. Although, Konoha-sama either giggled or chuckled whenever he cracked a joke. He quite liked his company, but he was rather busy. Running route. A normal occupation for a child to do. He was determined to get more of the story of how that had happened, but he wasn't that much in the loop yet. However, when Konoha-sama had arrived at his cabin with a prisoner of war from Iowa, Shisui knew that he was being presented an opportunity to serve the village once again. It was a perfect scenario for him, begrudging company, unwilling assistance in his rehabilitation as a shinobi, and the chance to do something for the good of the village. Catching her always made him extremely happy, so happy he couldn't help but smile, and it seemed Kuretsuchi became extremely annoyed with it after a while. You're such a smug asshole. Fuck you. Now, just because you're too slow to outrun me, don't take your frustrations out on me. I've been a perfectly kind guard. Sure, Warden. Aburame. No, I am not an Aburame. His prisoner quietly cursed under her breath and his smile reached his ears. He'd been just kind of lost. Rehabilitation was fine, but it was hard to have hope. Too easy to just get lost waiting for his body to heal. For his body to catch back up to the skills he used to have. To escape his despair. It really couldn't be overstated how much the girl's presence was soothing his troubles. She was constantly looking for ways to assassinate him or evade his detection and kept him focused and too busy to lose himself to his depression. The idea that it was so hard for her to tell that he was an Uchiha to boot was just icing on the cake. It was in the middle of a road running through the heartland of the Land of Lightning that two figures stood across from each other. There was nobody around them for miles, and that had been priorly arranged. Akatsuki took great pains to never have their agents outside of the headquarters without a partner to watch their back after all. Itachi stood idly in the shade of a tree as his new partner slowly slinked towards him. Serving in the Akatsuki was a blessing and a curse. It was actually safer than going it alone, and yet, the work he had done was nothing but despicable. For an organization intending to create a perfect world through stockpiling the Biju, they took every well-paying job they could find. Though, you'd take any job when you were an organization of criminals. Itachi ached for the day when Naruto or Sasuke stood before him, ready to let him rest, though, knowing Naruto, he'd try to bring him back to Konoha. Back home. The thought made Itachi smile for a brief moment. The boy was so innocent and naive. Itachi could never live amongst the village hidden in the leaves again. That chapter of his life was over. He'd heard the rumors of the Uchiha massacre. He was reviled and detested. The same as his new partner. Itachi was cursing himself for letting Biwa die. His replacement was much worse. Every Konohan shinobi knew the horror stories of Orochimaru the Snake Sannin after all. The man had piercing yellow eyes, skin literally as white as milk, and long, black hair. His smile was fanged and creepy as well. Itachi really struggled to not set him alight with Amaterasu. Kukuku, it's a pleasure to meet you, Itachi-kun. Where has Leader San ordered us to go? Kusagaker. We've been hired to destabilize the chain of command there. Interesting. Enough talk. We have a timetable to keep. As he led the way down the road, he began to wonder how long this partnership would last. And furthermore, if he was capable of ending the life of the Sannin and making it look like an accident. Hiruzen had just debriefed Kakashi of Mai Terumi's proposal. The Anbu commander seemed to be taking it rather well, his worry having lessened somewhat after the events of Shadow Valley. Yet, he could still feel the concern radiating off of him. Thoughts and concerns. Kakashi nodded and took a few seconds to process his initial reactions. He can't be sent alone surrounded by 2 armies of foreign shinobi. Agreed. It'd be too reckless. Kakashi nodded and looked down at the map of Kirigakure on the Hokage's desk. It was dated, the outposts most likely long abandoned, but notes from their intelligence department littered the margins of it. They didn't have a lot of information at their disposal though. Ever since Yagura's tenure as the Mizukage began, successful espionage attempts plummeted. Kakashi would know, he's the one who assigned each agent to their suicide mission. But, this could be exactly what we need to hold off hostilities from Iwa and Kumo. Kakashi nodded once again, reluctantly. This was a golden opportunity. An alliance with 2 other great nations, and if the Hokage could maintain relations with the lesser villages, that alliance would be a global superpower that'd be hard to combat. They could force Kumo and Iwa to the table. Maybe form a real, lasting peace. Minato's dream, so close to being realized. I have been able to contact someone in Yagura's regime who is offering to sell us some information. I'll assign Ibiki to lead the mission to intercept a Kiri Cypher Corp deployment. Kakashi offered. Good. We need to know more information about the current standings of Yagura's forces. Hiruzen said. Kakashi hummed in thought for a moment, taking in everything on the map. He looked back up with a question. What is her plan on utilizing Naruto? She would have Agent Konoha's forces be used to back up and reinforce her own battalions. He would be held in reserve to make a second wave if needed. Another nod in understanding. He'd need a guard. Someone strong enough to actually defend him and fast enough to exfiltrate him if needed. Hiruzen gave him a pointed look. It can't be you. You're too well connected to the Yondaime. I already fear that Onoki has made connections to Naruto's parentage. Kakashi bit back his rebuke. Very well. Then that only leaves one option. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Really? Only one option? There's only one man I trust to protect Naruto from enemies as well as himself. He'll be able to fight off the majority of Kiri's A-rank forces alone, and if pushed, I'm sure he could fight off the Sanbi itself. Very well. I'll inform Terumi-san that if she wishes for Agent Konoha's service, she'll have to pay for Might Guy. Hokage-sama. If this goes bad, it is my professional opinion that Konoha should silently push our forces to grow stronger. I suggest holding Jonin to wartime expectations. I would rather not militarize more than necessary, but you have my permission to start increasing Anbu recruitment and training. We'll start from the top down. Make them strong. Kakashi or Naruto will be alone on the front lines if war comes. With all respect, I'd be right there beside him, Hokage-sama. Orders or not. Not if they were his orders, Kakashi. Now, you have my orders. I want to double our Anbu in the next 5 years. You better get started. As Kakashi left, Hiruzen couldn't help but feel that he was making a mistake. Having been so anti-war for so long created this perception of him that he was weak. Danzo regularly told him that enough for him to know, others whispered it behind his back. Upon raising Naruto, he'd slowly began to resent that reputation, fearing that he may have actually been leading Konoha, the village he loved, to be too weak to defend itself. Now though, Konoha's political clout and military was at an all-time high. He couldn't help but feel that things were going to start going wrong, and that it was too late to stop events that were in motion. He may be tired of war after all, but that didn't mean it tired of him. Naruto was quickly becoming the center of this conflict. He was being too involved, too quickly. He didn't want to overplay their hand. Success or failure, Agent Konoha would be laying low for a good long while. He hoped his adopted son would understand. Sasuke stopped his hand seals when he sensed someone watching him. He looked up from the dock he was practicing on to see his classmate Sai watching him. He scowled and was about to turn away when he saw the boy slowly begin a hand seal sequence, the one he had just been practicing. The boy completed the hand seals and shot out a fireball at least 20 feet in radius, easily dwarfing any fireball Sasuke himself could yet launch. He stared, shocked, and shook himself out of it as the emotionless boy walked down the path and towards him. Your hand seals need more definitive positioning, and your chakra has to flow through your lungs more. The bigger the breathe, the larger the projectile. Sai blandly stated, sugar-coating nothing. The critiques were spoken as if from a senior shinobi. He hadn't been talked to like that since the man who murdered his father was still around. How do you know what I need to do? Sai shrugged, seemingly unaffected by his condescension. The pale boy looked frail. He never struck Sasuke as impressive or strong. He never performed amazingly, but never needed further work from Iruka-sensei after participating in an exercise. Quote. How strong are you? Sai gave him a bored look and shrugged again. Sasuke started to feel that he was being looked down on and he felt his temper starting to rise. He grit his teeth, but remembered what his mom had taught him after the massacre. He took a breath and crossed his arms, but he kept his scowl. I was taught how to be a shinobi before the academy. I could teach you how to use the jutsu if you want. Sasuke had been expecting some kind of flattery, some condolence for the Uchiha massacre. Every new person he met apologized for something they had taken no part in. But, Sai, he didn't even ask to be friends or anything. He just offered to teach him the jutsu, and well, loath as he was to admit it, he was the only one who taught him how to be a shinobi. His mom was too busy with leading the rest of the clan and didn't want to push him too fast. But he needed to grow. He needed to show that the Uchiha clan wasn't gone. He'd become the strongest ninja in the village, kill his traitorous brother, and become the Hokage. Or the clan head of the Uchiha, at the very least. He looked back to Sai, who was just standing there waiting, giving no sign of discomfort in the least. Quote. Sure. But, we can't talk about it. And we're not friends. Perfect. Start by running through the hand seals. No, you're already messing up. Drop the scowl. If you're angry, you're not focused. Don't tell me. Shut up and listen, stupid. It took every lesson his mother taught him to stop himself from lashing out, but if this is what it took to learn more than he'd be taught in the academy, he'd pay the price. Didn't mean that he'd have to like it though. Kisame looked up from his meal to watch Zabuza Momochi walk through the chambers set aside for the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Momochi was the latest addition, passing up Kisame, who did not have one of the famed swords as of yet. This was the first time he had seen Zabuza without the Kubikiribocho. That wasn't to say that keeping his sword present was childish. The 7 swords were almost holy relics and to Kiri were national treasures. Kisame dreamed of being one of the legendary 7 swordsmen as a child. Every fight and every lesson was just another rung on the ladder to achieving that goal. They were famed warriors and Kisame wanted to be the best in his youth. He never understood people. He didn't really like them either. He liked to fight. He liked to revel in the fear in his enemies' eyes when they realized that he was stronger, that he would win. Zabuza made his way straight towards Kisame, which was another first. They'd never spoken before and Kisame didn't know of any reason not to. Unless Zabuza had friends who had ended up being traitors or rebels, then he'd probably have some beef with him. It was pretty ballsy to try to assassinate him in the middle of the village though. Zabuza stood before him and looked him over. You happy here, Hoshigaki? Word is that you haven't seen any missions since your last one was a failure. Kisame couldn't help the chuckle that came out of him and glanced to Zabuza. He finished the last of his plate and stood up, towering over the smaller man. It may have only been a few inches of difference, but it set the tone in Kisame's favor. You better be careful, Momochi. Especially around me. I may be sitting on the sidelines now, but after a few more missions I think Fuguki will agree that I'm more than ready for Samahata. I could have had Kubikiribocho myself, but I decided to leave it for the smaller fish. Zabuza narrowed his eyes and tensed. The air stilled and the 2 warriors eyed each other up. Kisame had to admit, Zabuza would put up a fight. He was young and would definitely put up a fight, especially if he fought with the famous sword in hand. Ha 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 ha. Oh, I like your spirit, demon of the mist, but it does little more than get me antsy for a fight. Maybe we can have a spar once I get my sword, we'll see how you measure up. Why not try it now? Zabuza idly twirled a kunai that hadn't been unholstered a few moments ago. Kisame's grin widened and he leaned in close. Because I don't know for sure if you're a traitor or not, Momochi. I've heard the rumors about you, the whispers from interrogation. They say that you've talked to rebel conspirators, or that's what a rebel shouted to get them to stop. Why do you think Yagura put you in here with me? To let you be. Kisame laughed and his sharpened teeth glistened in the light. You're here so I can keep my eyes on you. If you make one misstep, I'll be the last one you'll ever fight. I want it to be a good fight. 2. Swordsman to swordsman, so I'll wait. If you're not a rebel, then we'll see who kills more of them on the battlefield. Zabuza grunted in annoyance and began to walk off. He flipped Kisame off as he walked away, shooting out just before he was out of earshot. Fuguki wants to see you have a new mission protecting the Cypher Corp. Better get to it, fishface. Ha 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 ha. Just you wait, Butcher. I want you to try your luck against me more and more. Naruto walked into the Hokage office with his mask in place. He entered and bowed to Hiruzen and looked at the woman sitting in front of the desk. She had long auburn hair which obscured half of her face. She was wearing a long blue dress and she had a Kiri Hittite. Agent Konoha. This is Mei Terumi, leader of the rebellion of Kirigakure. He bowed to her and stood back at attention. She gazed at him intently as he silently took a moment to let his empathy do its job. She was nervous of him. A part of her worried that he was brought in to assist in assassinating her. Fearing that the secrets of Kiri would be unveiled. She was getting increasingly tense trying to think of some way to stop him. Her anxiety was skyrocketing, making her less and less rational. She was starting to get worried from how long he'd been silent. It's a pleasure to meet you, Terumi-san. She nodded to him, calming down somewhat. Naruto was slightly embarrassed that he'd made her sit like that for so long. A handful of seconds was akin to hours of waiting to wary Shinobi. She was stronger than him but maybe not as strong as Hiruzen. That might just be your own bias, kid. He rolled his eyes behind his mask and looked to the Hokage. Hiruzen smirked and glanced at her. You seem a little nervous, Terumi-san. How could I not be when you force calling and your ace in the hole is a caveat of our negotiations? That being said, I'm fine to adhering to his jutsu now, Sarutobi Dono. His leader smirked, and Naruto could sense a part of his guardian be guilty about how much he was enjoying this little game he was playing. His eyes drifted back to Naruto and he slightly nodded, giving him approval to reveal the terrible truth. I've already cleared you, Terumi-san. She looked at him and didn't know how to initially react. It looked like she was going to laugh at first but then she immediately grimaced. What? I've already cleared you. You are trustworthy. But I didn't. She grew silent and Naruto heard Hiruzen lightly chuckle. I know, Terumi-san. You didn't sense me. Or my technique. You still don't. The genjutsu you were curious about trying to use to protect your mind from me is useless. I firmly believe it would have had the same result. She was shocked, and Naruto knew she wasn't used to feeling like that. He knew his ability, his gift, was something else. It was chakra-based, as were all other such abilities, and yet the amount of chakra needed for it was untraceable. Free, unfiltered, unfettered information. The greatest of the gifts he could have been given. At least, that was his own personal opinion. Now that we have cleared you, Terumi-san, why don't we go over your plan once more? Agent Konoha, take this as your personal briefing. Once we are done here, go and brief my guy. He will be your backup for the duration of this mission. Of course, Hokage-sama. Will we be going off to Kirigakure with Terumi-san? Yes. You will be off to war. Before he could reply, his empathy picked up a new concern from Hiruzen. The man who never doubted him before was worried that Naruto wouldn't follow orders if he knew that the Yondaime Mizukage was a Jinchuriki. Naruto, it's okay. He's just looking out for you. Kurama. He doubts me. He doesn't trust me. Single quote. Just breathe. It'll be alright. It will be, but only because he doesn't know that I know. Naruto. Now's our only chance to save Isobu, Kurama, and Yagura too. There has to be a way. Single quote. If it's too dangerous, then we should let the situation play out. Number. I won't just do what is easiest, not ever again. We won't let Isobu suffer anymore underneath the shinobi system. We will liberate him. The both of us can do it. We'll just have to be smart. Alright, kid. I'll start thinking of a plan. Naruto stood at attention as Mei and Hiruzen briefed him on the proposed assault, but through the meeting he couldn't shake the feeling that his adopted father knew there was something wrong with him. I'll show him that he can trust me, that I can save the Biju and help Konoha at the same time. I forgive you, Gigi. I'll prove you wrong and you'll never have to mistrust me again. Leaves were slowly falling in the fall wind as Yugito made her way through the forest. This wasn't the first time she was in the land of fire, but it was definitely the first time she had been sent to assassinate a fellow Jinchuriki. She had sparred against B long enough to know that she wasn't a pushover. She had even gotten through to Matabi and was able to befriend her after learning from Killer Bee and the Eight Tails example. If he's a Jinchuriki of Kurama and has a gift, then you need to be careful, dear. Kurama doesn't care about much, and anything he does care about, well, he'd get nasty to defend it. Thanks, Matabi-chan. She coldly eyed the road leading to Konoha's gates and settled in, but, I won't let Raikage-sama down. His trust in me is well placed. You beside me for this mission. As with all the rest, I just hope Kurama's grudge doesn't carry over once he reforms. Chapter 12. Naruto found that he greatly enjoyed Might Guy. He'd heard stories, of course, from Kakashi. A shinobi didn't need ninjutsu or genjutsu to be truly terrifying. To be deadly or efficient. Might Guy was a true master of taijutsu and could compensate for not utilizing the other two schools of jutsu. Naruto struggled to compare anyone but the Raikage to Guy's physical state. He looked harmless with his bowl cut, thick eyebrows, and charming yet innocent-looking grin. On top of all of that, Might Guy was probably one of, if not the happiest shinobi Naruto had ever met. When Naruto had arrived at the gate, he had come across Might Guy already present doing push-ups. The older Junin had jumped to his feet and saluted, not an ounce of resentment at being led by a shinobi less than a third his age. He was greeted only with respect and friendliness. A true shinobi of the leaf. He had no festering resentment or anger. No jealousy. The largest thing he could sense was a fear that he was not doing all he could to become stronger. In order to protect those he loved. Naruto was impressed. The two were waiting patiently for Mei Terumi. Naruto had packed all his supplies, everything he could think of at least. He had triple-checked before leaving his apartment. The task before him was terrifying. He worried about the coming confrontation. After experiencing the events of Shadow Valley, he saw the memories of hundreds of clones in his dreams. Some had managed to make it all the way until the end of the battle, and those memories were the roughest. Images of the aftermath dancing in his head, merging together. He was brought out of his funk when he felt a finger tapping his mask. He looked up to see Guy leaning down looking at him. Something on your mind, Konoha-san? You seemed distracted. I humbly offer myself as an ear for you to rest your concerns upon. Yash. Naruto held in a giggle and smiled behind his mask. Thank you, Guy-san. I was just thinking about the mission and the upcoming fights. Ah. A hardened look overcame the Junin's eyes and an understanding bloomed within him. I remember what the last shinobi war was like. I, too, am nervous about engaging in the upcoming battle. But, may I offer some advice that my father once gave me? Your father? Naruto blinked. He'd never heard much about Guy's family, just as he'd never really heard much about Kakashi's father either. He was known as the eternal genin who didn't know a single jutsu. And yet, he saved my life and the life of my team from the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. For some reason Naruto was entranced by the story, the feelings within Might Guy enthralling him. As he spoke, his negative emotions slowly faded, overcome by the void of happiness and joy. He was almost empty of anything negative and it was extremely soothing. He opened the 8th gate, the gate of death. Fought them all off. He was stronger than most Junin, but he kept his strength for when he needed it most. That kind of power when attained should only ever be used with a self-rule, so as to not endanger abusing it. What was his rule? That he'd only use his power when necessary to protect someone precious to him. I see. Why did you bring that up? Guy looked at him and Naruto sensed he was trying to be gentle with him. Because we both are capable of amazing things. Yet, we have to be careful of when to use them. Especially in Kurigakure. I know that. I know. You know what it costs. Yet, do you have a rule? A self-rule? Naruto paused. If it was anyone else, he would have just dismissed the question. Honestly, he wasn't sure why he was thinking about it, except, he remembered what he had told Kabuto. You can't break a promise. And I promise not to break any of mine. I don't break promises. Guy grinned at that and gave him a rigid thumbs up. Yosh. A most grand self-rule. That would work fine. My advice is to only use your power to keep that rule. Naruto furrowed his brow in confusion. How does that translate to not using my power? Only use it when you have to in order to not break a promise. Guy grinned widely, his hands on his hips, and Naruto could almost swear that he was shining. Huh, okay. Yeah, Yosh. I think you and I are going to have a grand time. Kurigakure is a wonderful environment for cardio. All the sandy beaches are wonderful for jogging. I don't think we'll have much leisure time, Guy-san. Indeed. So we'll have to do as much as we can in what little time we have allotted for leisure. Gentlemen. Naruto jumped as Mei Terumi appeared behind them both, smirking smugly. Guy seemed a little tense but quickly relaxed and gave her a thumbs up. We are excited to begin our mission in aiding the relief of your village, Terumi-san. Excellent. Shall we get going? She looked to him and he could see her assessing him. Focused on him. Wary. Scared, hesitant. He gave a nod. Yash. To the land of water. Mei smiled and took the lead. Perfect, we'll meet my escort at the border. I'll lead the way. She was off and Naruto and Guy quickly followed. Sai sat beside Hinata in their seats. They were working on a simple enough activity, though trying not to finish it too quickly was proving difficult. It was one of the most basic seal matrices, and this exercise was to identify anyone with a talent in Fuinjutsu. Sai already identified that no one here would be considered a prodigy in the art. He himself was not a prodigy, but he'd long ago learned how to make the most basic of seals. Paired with his own style of jutsu, the most basic of seals were simple. There was something about the patterns, the connections, and the art itself of sealing that made the chakra interact with the world as it did. Sealing was one of the most esoteric arts because it carried the most limitations in its use at first glance. To the majority of shinobi, the time to make a seal and use it would mean death. Pre-made seals were all fine and dandy, but keeping a vast arsenal of different seals and then having them be damaged. Catastrophe. It wasn't safe to store seals you didn't need. Explosive notes were mass-produced because they were some of the simplest designs. They were made to be destroyed on activation. An explosive release of chakra. Yet, quite useful in the hands of the shinobi. Which is why it was important that new shinobi were actually sat down and instructed in their creation and use. Directly in front of them was Sasuke Uchiha. Behind them were the two girls, Sakura and Ino. Ever since he and Hinata had become friends, the other students in the class had begun to pay more attention to him. Primarily, the other clan heirs. It was a rarity to have so many heirs together in a single class, it was something of an opportunity for intelligence gathering. Yet, their scrutiny was annoying. It was hard to observe them whilst they blatantly watched him. The girls behind him had decided they needed to watch out for and protect Hinata from any of his schemes. He suspected they thought him a pervert. That's what they seemed primarily worried about. They were learning how to be shinobi, and their largest concerns were if the Inuzuka was going to peep on them and which girl the Uchiha liked more. Disappointing. Not even Hinata was exempt, her anxiety paralyzing her at times and worried that she'd never see Naruto again. At least she had some hope. Scouts and spies didn't need to have bloodlust after all. The Uchiha was a hard tell. He didn't talk to anyone. Yet, the few words he spoke to Sai during their training sessions were somewhat informative on his personality. He craved the strength to find his brother and confront him for his crimes. Of course, going up against Itachi Uchiha anytime soon for him was suicide. The Uchiha heir was gifted, but even he didn't quite measure up to what the third shinobi war had molded his brother into. That worked for him though. Sai was slowly revealing more and more of his arsenal and Sasuke was becoming more comfortable with him, more cooperative and enthusiastic about their training sessions. His mission was going very, very well. Sai-kun, why do you want to be a shinobi? He looked over and saw Hinata looking at him, her seal completed in front of her. She had done quite well. There was nothing else for me. You've done quite well on your seal, Hinata-san. She blushed and looked down, her fingers poking into each other. He turned back to his fourth seal and began painting it. What do you mean? There was nothing else. He looked back and saw that she was more or less back in control of herself. Odd. That should have taken 10 more minutes. There was no choice to make. He gave her a smile, like Shin had taught him, expecting her to take his answer and go back to work. Instead, confusion slowly grew over her face. Did your parents make you? 3 questions. 3 questions in under a minute. Hinata Hyuga was having a conversation with him. During class. He had no idea what to do. Hinata kept staring at him patiently, waiting for his reply. No, I don't have parents. She gave him a sympathetic look and put her hand on his shoulder comfortingly. Sai's thoughts were overwhelmed. What is happening right now? I'm sorry, Sai-kun. That must be awful. If you'd like you could come and do homework or Ito over at my place, if you get lonely. He nodded and went back to his work and she looked at him for a few moments, before lightly smiling and going back to her work. Sai wasn't prepared for that kind of interaction. He'd have to talk more with Shin. Hinata was becoming more comfortable with him and seeking a higher level of friendship or casualness with him, if she was unsettled by him that could endanger his mission. He had to learn how to be her friend. He had to learn fast. Perhaps this mission wasn't so clear-cut as he had assumed it to be. Why do you want to be a shinobi? Kitsuchi glared at Warden from her position in front of the sink. They were making lunch and he seemed to insist on getting to know her better and being friendly. What was worse, is that she didn't know if he was genuine and just that stupid, or knew that being nice pissed her off the most and was just that good. I'm the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. She went back to washing the potatoes. She wasn't trusted with peeling them. The only knife she was allowed to use was a dull butter knife. Not much a weapon. That's not an answer. I don't care about giving an answer. Honestly, he was just the worst. She hated his stupid face. This fucking shack. She hated being a prisoner. She hated being kept from her home. Shut up. Stop talking to me. You aren't the prisoner. You don't get to be nice and talk to me like I'm being unreasonable for not wanting to talk or bond with you just because this cell isn't an empty room with iron bars. I want to go home. I want to be a kunoichi of my village and I want to go on missions and kill as many of you leaf fuckers as I fucking can. Her anger filled her and she rushed forwards. Her hand grasped for the butter tray, securing her weapon, and as soon as she could her arm slammed down, stabbing the knife into his shoulder. He stood there, hand clutching her wrist, blade just pressing into the fabric of his shirt. He looked towards her, and her anger burned that she couldn't read anything from him. He wore a deep crimson blindfold, and not being able to look him in the eyes infuriated her at times. She should have been the one with the advantage, but she saw nothing when she looked at him. Found no clues or weaknesses. No, instead, her eyes began to well with tears due to her anger and embarrassment. She was crying like a child. Some kunoichi she was. Kitsuchi. Don't say my name. I don't want to talk to you. She jerked out of his grip, butter knife clattering to the ground, and she sullenly went back to the sink. He silently picked up the knife and went back to setting up the stove. Giving her space, listening to her and respecting her boundaries. She couldn't hate him more at that moment. I'll make it home. To Dad and Grandpa and I'll be so strong that no one could ever capture me. Never again. It's been some time since we've gone without a fight this long, Roshi. Roshi nodded to the silent voice of his permanent companion and looked around the beautiful landscapes around him. Tea Country was known for its fertile land and stunning vistas. He'd gone on a mission this way years ago, and always wished to enjoy spending his time wandering the country's roads. A peaceful life he never once imagined he'd ever get to experience. Sense anyone, Goku? The Biju chuckled deeply. No, Roshi. I've yet to sense any Jinchurikis closing in on us. Or any large groups of shinobi. Same as you. I wouldn't have asked you to keep your senses out if mine were better than yours. Your paranoia is understandable, but I fear no longer required. They've kept to their word. It seems that the boy and Kurama can be trusted. I have more cause to dislike the fox than you do, but it seems that we truly are on the same side. Roshi grimaced and clicked his tongue. That made things more complicated. Imagine if their plan worked, Roshi. True freedom for both of us. It seemed his partner was already willing to toss those dice, but Roshi wasn't as convinced. It's too soon. He's only convinced as we'd need to guarantee that more Jinchuriki were on board before we committed ourselves to this. Besides, it could still be a trap by Konoha. Kurama would never work with a shinobi village to endanger a sibling. No matter how much he says he dislikes some of us. It isn't a trap. Well, I wish I had your confidence. We could go and speak with Han and Kokuo. We might be able to convince. I'm not going to endanger Han until I'm sure of our chances of surviving, of success. His mind was as silent as the clouds drifting through the sky. The fields were bursting with color, and the breeze was sweet with the scent of the flowers. It had been so long since he had experienced peace. He had fought countless battles. He had dreamed of retirement, though that fantasy had faded day by day. He had a chance here. To disappear, fade from memory. To live the life he always wanted. You've wished for this for quite some time. Roshi grunted in acknowledgement. He had wished for this chance secretly and deeply. There were many things he wanted to experience and see. Just retire to some mountain cabin. Paint or write or something. He never had much a chance to know if he was good at either one. Maybe garden. The boy wouldn't stop trying to save the Biju. Number. They won't stop. That was the problem. Roshi could wash his hands of the elemental nations, he had it in him to walk away. The boy was too young, too invested. He'd fight the fight and die if needed. With or without help. That brings us to the final question, Roshi. Will you let him fight alone? Or will you aid him? That was hard to answer for him. This could be his best chance, his one chance to leave all the fighting behind him. To be at peace and live a simple life. The kid could pull it off without him. With enough Jinchuriki he had a shot. But there was a larger chance he wouldn't succeed. Naruto would need the allegiance of every single Jinchuriki he could get to his side. They wouldn't all make it through. Some, if not all, of the Jinchuriki would die. If he disappeared, at the very least, Naruto would die in his quest. That was the cost of his life of peace. Possibly, condemning the boy to death. Are you okay with that? Kisame stared blankly at the last Kiri Kunoichi under his protection, dying by his hand. She had been kind and sweet, but weak. Soft. She looked up at him, her death throes shaking her body. What a terrible life. That was Ibiki Morino across from them with a squad of Konohan elite Junin. She was too weak to risk capture. So the bloody mist demanded her death. The deaths of all the Cypher Corp shinobi. That's what he'd been taught. Everyone was disposable. He didn't regret killing her, it was just unfortunate that it was necessary. What are you doing? Those are your own men. Kisame glanced over at the disgusted Leaf shinobi and scowled. I shall not hand over any of the Cypher Corp shinobi alive. Ibiki growled and took a few steps towards him, his squad readying their swords. Surrender. There is no escape for you. Kisame grit his teeth. If he had one of the 7 he could have fought them, torn them apart. As he was now though. If only he'd been given Samahata. Stop. Kisame jumped off the cliff and down into the abyss below for his village. Naruto inhaled the coastal air. They had made good time and had reached the border of the land of fire in a number of days. Mei's pace had been relentless to the point where Guy had to carry Naruto on his back. He could have matched it, but would have needed slight assistance from Kurama. His identity as a Jinchuriki was paramount to be kept silent. Thus, he endured the embarrassment of a piggyback ride, he kind of enjoyed them anyways. He could tell they had been close to the coast as the temperature cooled and the environment began to shift. The dense forests had turned into coastal woodland, and the animals had changed as well. It was still the land of fire, but it truly felt like someplace else. The coasts of the land of fire were quite beautiful. They weren't very developed, only a few coastal towns with ports to do trade. It made the majority of the seaside quite tranquil and calm. He was never more relaxed than areas with minimal human presence. Kurama felt a little guilty about that fact, apparently. He looked ahead sharply as he sensed a group of anxious shinobi. It seems their entourage were waiting for them at the boat. Your men await us, Terumi-san. She offered nothing more than a smile and a nod, and they shifted course. They arrived to find 3 shinobi awaiting them. Naruto was impressed. One of them had a sword that couldn't be anything other than one of the famed 7 swords. It looked to be the Kubikiribocho. The other, oh man. The other had a hidden Byakugan. The Hyuga would throw a fit if they ever found out. He'd definitely be reporting to the Sandaime about it for sure. Mei-sama, it seems the mission was a success. Indeed. Ow. This is Might Guy. Guy gave a grin and a thumbs up, and this is Agent Konoha. He nodded. The men both gave him their attention. The one with the sword walked up to him. He wore his headband sideways on his head over his black hair. He had bandages wrapped all around his neck and lower face, not unlike Kakashi's mask. He wore arm guards on his forearms and a black t-shirt. Of course, his sword, a slab of steel the length of a man, was holstered on his back. The man was filled with pride and bloodlust, closing off his vulnerabilities out of fear of loss and grief. He was malicious, he enjoyed the fight. The other one, Ao was more composed. More honorable, yet cunning. Both were fearsome in different ways. They made excellent bodyguards for a hopeful cage. So, you are responsible for the massacre of Shadow Valley. How many shinobi did you take out, eh? Naruto tilted his head to look up at the seven swordsmen. He was quite tall. He was also a very violent man. He was one of those shinobi that would never be able to adjust to civilian life. Naruto knew that Zabuza would never be able to retire. That was sad. He felt bad for him. More than I care to admit. Zabuza scoffed. You're just a kid. How do we know that you truly acted alone? Isn't your reputation also based off of actions you committed as a child, demon of the bloody mist? Zabuza laughed out loud, a deep and unsettling sound. The man truly did have a fearsome presence. Oh, I know that I killed those classmates of mine. We're a simple village. Konoha on the other hand is much more devious. I believe that the reports are false. From what I'm seeing here, I am only more sure of it. You didn't act alone. Ha ha ha. The group of Kiri ninja looked to the boisterous laugh of Guy. Agent Konoha is one of our most premier shinobi. If anything, the reports surely underplay his effectiveness. Zabuza scoffed. And who are you supposed to be? Might Guy, son of Might Die. Zabuza rolled his eyes and scoffed again. The man's skepticism seemed to be hard to contain. Sure. Like that means something. Guy just chuckled lowly. Perhaps it should, my youthful ally. Mei looked at the assembled group and decided to take command. Enough chatter, we need to make haste to Kiri. Yagura surely knows something up with the three of us missing. Have my orders been handed out? Ao nodded to her. Indeed, Mei-sama. She turned her gaze to Zabuza, who grunted and nodded the same. Excellent. Then let's go. Her shinobi nodded and walked towards the beach where a small boat was beached. Naruto and Guy followed behind Naruto, sensing no plans to backstab them. Good. Guy had been briefed of the possibility that Yagura's agents could have infiltrated Mei's inner circle, but it seems that that wasn't the case. They got on the ship and started sailing to the islands of Kiri. It was time to go to war. Hiruzen, I commend your apparent ruthlessness. It took me quite by surprise. It is not often that I would admit that, and you are one of the few that I feel would not become ballooned with arrogance at that admittance. We both know that we are capable of surprising the other. Our villages have often butted heads, but so far it has always been business. Or war. After the days of the Shodime Tsuchikage, our relations have never been personal. Your agent saw fit to capture my granddaughter. You have my attention, Hiruzen, whether you want it or not. I am making the first move of negotiations, and they are personal. As a gesture of goodwill, I will allow these negotiations to take up 1 month of time to iron out. After that, I will take action and assume that my granddaughter is dead. Do not push me to that point, old friend. I am willing to admit defeat, but do not believe that I will bend to your every whim. Doting grandfather I may be, I am still the Tsuchikage. We both know what that means. It's also worth noting that one of my assets has disappeared the same time this attack happened. Would you also like to take credit for that, Professor? I am mildly excited to receive your response. It's been some time since I've had the pleasure of mincing words with someone of intellect. The rakeage can be so brutish at times. I await your terms. Onoki. Sandame Tsuchikage. Well, it's as much as I suspected. Hiruzen set the letter down and looked across from him where Shikaku and a masked Kakashi sat across from him. Mainly for formality's sake, his hair was pretty identifiable. Perhaps he should tell him to start using his hood more often. He's angry. He might believe that the entire purpose of the attack was to attain his granddaughter. I agree, Shikaku. Should we let him believe that to be the case? Would clarifying it was outside of Konoha's mission objectives be beneficial? I think it might just be more insulting. Kakashi leafed through his folder and hummed in thought. Well, we could always just gloss over that in our response. Onoki seems to respond better with blunt correspondence. I suggest just outlining your terms and assuring him of her safety and well-being. And she is being kept safe, Inu-san. Kakashi made a noncommittal shrug and leaned back in his chair. She's being kept in an off-the-record safe house. Increase her guard. Kakashi silently nodded. What asset is he referring to, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen glanced back to the letter in his hand. This stays here. They both nodded immediately. Roshi, the Jinchuriki of the Yonbi. Kakashi, having known this already, didn't react visibly. Shikaku raised an eyebrow and exhaled audibly. Was that Hokage-sama? Indeed, Shikaku. Agent Konoha convinced him to defect from his village. That won't be written in our records. Hokage-sama. What is our play here? We're stripping Iwa of one of their Jinchuriki and preemptively killing a platoon of their shinobi. Kumo and Iwa had agreed to launch a joint invasion. They would have had to march through Kusa or Taki to get to us. Onoki committed 1,500 men. This looks more like a show of force than an invasion. The Tsuchikage was probably just gauging the Raikage and his intentions. Well, regardless, their plans will have been set back. You're coming very close to questioning my judgment. Is that a crime, Hokage-sama? You used to hold me to do that when I had my doubts. Has that changed? There was silence in the office as Hiruzen regarded his Jonin commander coolly. The man wasn't wrong. He had requested to always provide his feedback. He'd have to relax a little, it seemed. They weren't at war. It would do him well to deliberate with his advisors. Shikaku, I have made mistakes in the past and I'm not looking forward to making them again. These are uncertain times and peace must be fought for. Shikaku slowly nodded his head. Very well, Hokage-sama, shall I get to work drafting a reply? Please. Shikaku nodded and was off. Kakashi waited for the door to close before he asked his question. Recruitment and training is going well, Hokage-sama. Good, Kakashi. Keep things on track. I want to be ready for any surprise. Kabuto's hand hovered over the body below him. Scalpel in hand, the blade was barely hanging over the skin. It was a simple enough procedure. The experiment was to test how well a body could handle flesh that passively absorbed chakra by the skin. Orochimaru had discovered a small clan in grass who had been born with the inclination to develop the bloodline, and the body in front of him was one of the last of the lineage. The body was dead, of course, so that wasn't why his hand was frozen above the corpse. No, the inaction was because his body had been paralyzed. Just as he was about to initiate the procedure, he felt his body slow. His heart rate decreased as well. His muscles tightened and he had no control. He managed to take a deep breath before it fully set in. His eyes were focused on the body before him and couldn't move from their point of focus. He heard a door which should not have been unlocked open from behind him, and someone walk in. Kabuto, Kabuto, Kabuto. I expected more from Orochimaru's right hand. You didn't even detect the toxin I sprayed in the air in front of your precious lab door. How sloppy. A voice, which was definitely not Orochimaru, called out mockingly from behind him. If it was physically possible, Kabuto would have grinned ear to ear. Finally, things had been going far too well as of late. He'd been waiting for the shoe to drop. Who would expect a lowly data entry clerk to catch Orochimaru's best spy? The footsteps walked up right behind him and a stack of papers were slapped on top of the body in front of him. The voice was decidedly male, high-pitched and dripping with a facade of self-importance. The clerk walked to the other end of the body, and Kabuto could just barely make out his pinched face, crooked teeth, poor complexion, greasy hair, and one eye that almost bulged from his face. Shocked. It was me, Kabuto. Mawuahahaha. I don't even remember his name. I have to refamiliarize myself with the staff after this. The sound shinobi laughed as he reveled in the power of his current position. Sloppy. Very sloppy. Important information. Samples of completed experiments accounted for but missing in all from experiments signed off by you while Orochimaru was away. I may not have even caught on if you hadn't pilfered from every single experiment until now. Perhaps I was a bit too ambitious there. You're going to die. I will usurp your place as Orochimaru-sama's right hand, and as I continue to climb the ladder of glory, he continued on, and Kabuto found it quite hard to focus on his monologuing. This was a serious setback to gathering the most nefarious and unethical shinobi under one banner, that he hadn't foreseen in the past. Their moronic narcissism. This shinobi, whose name still escaped him, could have truly killed him. That was, he could have killed him, when he first came into the room. But then he gave in to the urge or compulsion to boast, as if getting lucky with one trap made him a superior shinobi to Kabuto. Weaker shinobi killed stronger shinobi every day. Sadly for him, his window had passed. He leaned in close, his breath as foul as his deformed eye, spittle flying from his lips in excitement. Awahahahahaha. Any last words, Kabuto? No. Good. Hee hee ah, wait, what, URGK? Surprise bloomed in his face as Kabuto effortlessly stabbed the scalpel in his hand through his bulbous eye and into the soft meat of his brain. His mouth rapidly spewed whimpers as the spittle flowed from his panicking maw. He silently backed up to the wall at his back and collapsed down onto the ground, softly pawing at the skin around his eye. The organ surged forwards around the blade. Through the gap in his iris, blood, brain matter, and the retinal fluid oozed in a horrific blend of mess. It slowly dripped down his cheek and mixed in with his spit as Kabuto slowly gathered up the documents and dusted the spit and bile off of them. He calmly walked up to the dying ninja and dropped down on his toes. He met the mewling visage before him with as polite a smile as ever. "Thank you for your service, failed experiment 37 BT. He grabbed the scalpel and slowly pulled it out. Gra uah. As he pulled, the eye popped out and the poor soul pawed at it feebly. It seems the fool didn't realize he was already dead. He was as dead as the corpse on the table now that he was underneath Kabuto's scalpel. Well, now I have to get rid of this evidence, and I've found the perfect hiding place for them. Once I've inserted them into your chest, you'll quickly bleed out. So you see, this is as much a necessity as it is a mercy. No, don't struggle. It'll be over soon. I'm not done with my work here yet." And he wasn't. Cutting open a living man's chest to stuff a handful of damning documents into wasn't quite what Naruto had sent him here for, but ruthlessness would keep him alive in the snake's den. Orochimaru never questioned how many corpses it took for Kabuto to attain results. He didn't know this man's name, and he never would. Nobody would. Kabuto would write his disappearance off as a cost of experimentation, and that is what would become the truth. As a handful of other such failed experiments in the last few months had been. Nobody was perfect, and even Kabuto made mistakes. He would just become another nameless, failed experiment. But he was one of the few that had had the drop on Kabuto Yakushi. He just hadn't the luck to live to tell the tale. The group traveling to Kiri had just landed ashore and began to head to their headquarters when a cool mist arrived. His traveling companions didn't seem to be bothered, so Naruto had assumed that it was a natural occurring mist that the land of water was known for. They traveled deeper into the island and the mist slowly grew thicker. As soon as he could sense the faint traces of chakra saturated in the moisture suspended in the air, he felt the electric shock of hate in the air. He flinched as if burned and gasped. The rebels tensed and Guy immediately stepped directly up to his back before he could even shout his warning. Ambush. Shinobi rushed from the trees and the Kiri civil war began. Guy stood rigidly behind him as Zabuza gave a bloodthirsty roar and charged without following in his shadow. Mei leapt off to the side, with the majority of enemies branching off to single her out and engage her. Guy-san. Hi. Guy's leg lifted high up on the ground and swept out to kick at the closest foe. The loyalist was able to evade Guy's kick, but Naruto, who had latched onto the appendage, swung out with a kunai and slit his throat. The rest of their foes immediately backpedaled and got some distance, if only at the absurdity of the maneuver. Guy's leg was stretched out and Naruto hung onto it like it was a branch of a tree. The monkey claw was most effective when hanging from the limbs of trees. The nearby coastal trees' branches would be hard-pressed to hold even Naruto's weight. Guy, on the other hand, his arms and legs had jokingly been referred to be as thick as a tree branch before. All it took was one awkward question to start a conversation on their journey about the possibility of such a collaboration. Of course, you'd have to be about the size of a child and be able to predict Guy's next move to be able to not get disorientated. Thankfully, that worked out just fine for him. And so, the world witnessed the birth of the experimental taijutsu combination style, living tree. Naruto was secretly glad that their enemies would be dead after witnessing it. Hooah! Guy gave a shout from his stance on one leg and hopped off the ground and towards the largest of their opponents. Guy could move fast. Naruto could barely keep up with the spinning world, relying solely on his empathy to know when and how he was intended to attack. It seemed that the style was quite effective. Most taijutsu styles were designed for specific attacks or had specific counters. Naruto was quite certain no one had ever tried something like what he and Guy were attempting right now. Guy alone would have been able to hold off these foes on his own. With Naruto's assistance, they were overcoming them, bearing down upon them like an unpredictable wall of death and fists. Guy would swing his leg, and Naruto would throw a kunai the opposite direction to hit the unsuspecting enemy in Guy's blind spot. It was unorthodox, unconventional, and unbelievable. And somehow the two of them were making it work. Even while the world was a blur, Naruto's perception of the emotions around him gave him a clear picture of what was happening outside of his and Guy's fight. Zabuza was locking blades with multiple enemies at once, hacking and slashing, the minor wounds he was accruing not slowing him down in the least. Ao was dancing around the large cleaver, somehow, being able to tell where all of the enemy's openings were despite not being in line of sight of them. Mei was holding off 12 shinobi on her own. Considering how much fear she was inspiring, Naruto believed that she was doing just fine in holding off her adversaries. Guy pulled back as enemy reinforcements arrived, and Naruto sensed that another full squad was backing up the enemies attacking Mei. She originally had been fine, melting down 2 enemies in the first few seconds, but some of the newcomers were stronger. They were there specifically to kill Mei. He couldn't let that happen. He panted and quietly looked up at Guy as the enemies regrouped in order to rush them again. How many of me can you handle at once, Guy-san? 3. Konoha Taiko. Maybe 4 with more practice, but 3 for sure, Yosh. Very well. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. A flash of smoke startled the approaching Kiri loyalists, who were gobsmacked to see Guy with 3 Narutos hanging from his arms and a leg emerge from the smoke. What kind of fuckery? Hoo-ah. Guy descended upon them as an angel of death, as the Narutos swiped with kunais at every opportunity. The real Naruto made sure that Guy would be able to hold his own for one more second before turning and rushing to Mei's aid. He couldn't let her die. As he ran to her, he had to step over 3 half-melted corpses from her boil release. She was capable, so he had a good feeling that together they'd win. His help would even the odds, even slightly. That was important to do whatever he could to keep her alive. If she died, he'd never be able to speak to Yagura. Kakashi looked up from his Ika as Inoichi Yamanaka slid into the seat beside him. This is a first. Are you here for the world-famous Ichiraku ramen, Inoichi? No, Kakashi, I've heard some rumors, and I wanted to come touch base with you before I had fully decided how truthful what I've heard was or not. Let me guess, was it the Nara? Inoichi gave him a look, one that those in the Konoha Shinobi Corp all knew was customary if one of the Ino Shikacho thought you were sullying one of their companion clan's names. Wow, I never realized how specific these looks were, Kakashi thought as Inoichi ordered a bowl to be polite and gather his thoughts. Quote. Yes. I heard some things that Shikaku was muttering about to himself. It has me worried. That is, do you think that it's possible for the Hokage to abuse his position? I mean, well, you better hurry up, Inoichi, because I really don't like the tone of this conversation. Alright, I'll just say it then. I'm worried that Hokage-sama isn't acting in the village's best interest. More specifically, I think he's hiding something about Agent Konoha. Of course, not even in the village at the moment, and people were still finding some way to cause a stink in his name. He loved his little brother, but he was quite the magnet for trouble. At least he didn't have to deal with all of it most of the time. It seemed this mess had fallen in his lap and now it was his turn to clean it up. Things had just started to get spicy in Jiraiya's latest novel too. Inoichi, I'm not allowed to discuss personnel. You or if it's a clan matter. And Kakashi, I want the truth. Of what? Of his heritage. I think Agent Konoha is a Yamanaka and that the Hokage is hiding him from me. Kakashi rolled his lone eye and smiled condescendingly. That's false, Inoichi. There's no way. Inoichi set down a file between them and slid it over to him. You're wrong, Kakashi. Agent Konoha is related to the Yamanaka. His own files confirm it. Kakashi looked down at the confidential file and opened it up and saw the results of the blood test Inoichi was talking about. This was a file that only the Hokage should have had access to. This was the authentic Anbu personnel folder. Supposedly, it should have been tucked away in the sweet, warm heart of the Hokage Tower, not on the sticky counter of the village's finest ramen establishment. It showed that Agent Konoha was indeed a Yamanaka. What the fuck? Exactly, Kakashi. What the fuck? The Yamanaka's glare was on full display and Kakashi felt as if this conversation was going to turn into a real pain in his ass. As clan head, I demand to have an audience with Agent Konoha, and secure him in our clan compound. About that. Agent Konoha is on a mission. The glare intensified and Kakashi knew in his bones that someone scheming was really going to fuck over his good day he had been having. Let's go speak with the Hokage, Kakashi. Now. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.